Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Good Couple of LLJ. I'm here with Peter Farry, 32 years in the business, promoter, announcer, commentator, booker, radio, community TV. Worked the Wrestle Riot Tour in 1992, thousands of live shows, etc. A talent acquisition manager for Bosch. How did you get interested in wrestling?
Hey, good afternoon. Look, I would have been a kid born in New Zealand, and we used to get, I think it was on a Saturday night about midnight or 11 p.m. or something, we used to get the wrestling from Australia. At least I think it was from Australia on TV over there. And, my earliest memories are people like Waldo Von Erich, Mark Lewin, King Curtis, Abby, and a few of them, Bulldog Brow, and used to try and stay up as a little kid till all hours of the night, and you'd fall asleep, but you'd watch it, and got hooked ever since then, and followed it. So we're talking well over 50 years now.
Awesome stuff. So who were some of your favourites growing up?
Look, I think as a kid, you sort of, the ones you first see or get into, Mark Lewin and King Curtis were two of my absolute favourites. That was really big. A very, very young, as I grew a little bit older, but a very young 21-year-old Rick Martel came over to New Zealand and did exceptionally well. But the promoter we had at the time over there, quite a synonymous name with wrestling on this side of the world, and Steve Rickard, who unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago. But he would bring over the very, very best. He had a deal with, I think it would have been Jim Barnett over here, and they would work a sharing arrangement with some of the guys that came here. But I'd say Lewin and Curtis were probably my first two favourites.
Awesome stuff. That leads me into asking this question. When did you start promoting, and how'd that go?
Well, we came to Australia as a family at the end of 78. And, I was really looking forward to sort of seeing the Aussie scene. But, of course, that's when World Championship Wrestling wound up. So I'm not sure if I was a bad influence or a bad moz, but it finished. And so I didn't really get to be in Australia for its heyday, so to speak. They did run some shows down here in Melbourne at Festival Hall and that, but all the Americans had gone, and it was very much the local boys. And I remember, I think the first time I ever entered Festival Hall, I think there was a match. I think it might have been the main event, was Mario Milano and Steve Rackman. So I took an interest, and there was a promoter at the time, although I never spoke to him and I never met him, but his name was Frank Burwash, and he was promoting the shows. So I wrote him a letter and gave it to someone to give to him, but I never heard from him, so I don't know whatever happened or whether he never got it. And then a few years down the pike, there was another guy who'd been involved in the wrestling here a few times. And his first name just eludes me for a minute, but surname was Vuknik. And he'd brought out the Young Bloods and the Cuban Assassin and Samoa Joe from New Zealand and a few others. And I somehow got in touch with him, and I can't remember how, but he was working out of an old car yard in Footscray. And he invited me down, and I went down, and just as I walked in the door, Mario Milano was in. I'm thinking, oh, wow. And he puts his hand out. Hello, I'm Mario. I'm the booker. And so, long story short, I got to go on tour. Kenny Dunlop was on the tour as well. I think Cognacavides. And I went up, and Tony Marino was the ref in that. And I went up to the Albury show more as a observer than anything else. And unfortunately, that's at the time where Jay Youngblood had taken sick and went into hospital and subsequently died. But his brother Mark was on the tour as well. And I sort of got the bug on that tour. A man who became in later life, my best friend and still is, and Gene Gatto, he was the commentator or the announcer. So anyway, I got back to Melbourne and made contact with Mario. Him and Dominic Kerr were running a pizza shop in Clayton. And I went up and saw them and said, listen, I'm keen to promote. And it sort of started from there. So I think it was June or July of 1989, I promoted my first show at St. Albans in the big sort of town hall there. And it was all the local boys at the time, but you had the card was in the main event was Mario and Dominic against Casey Miller and the Assassin, who I don't think people would mind me saying after 30-something years was Sam Rossi under a mask. The semi-main was the Hitman George Julio against Konyakovides, and that was always an outstanding match. I had the girls, Sherry Sinatra and Princess Tara, and then the local boys, and little Vic Ferrari was my referee.
Awesome stuff. A little bit of trivia. I'm not sure if I got the name right, but in New Zealand, you had a company like World Championship Wrestling called On the Mat. Was that the name of the company?
That was the name of the TV program, which Steve Rickard and Ernie Ladd, who was a TV sort of sports commentator, if you like, over there at the time. And I think it was Sunday, I'm pretty certain it was a Sunday, every Sunday On the Mat would come on, and they would open up with the music to The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And that was the theme music for the show. And On the Mat was the name of the TV program. But as I said, back in those days, and as I later learned, as I was more and more into the business and whatever, people tell you what went on and whatever. There was a bit of a share arrangement. So some of the greatest workers that really ever graced the ring came through Australia and New Zealand. A lot of it was affiliated with the old NWA, more so than what was then the WWF, which stood for the Worldwide Wrestling Federation under Vince Sr. But we had some of the greatest come, like Fuji and Tanaka as a tag team, the Von Steigers. They brought out a few who weren't so great. Paul Graham, the Australian bodybuilder, who just unfortunately, he just never had it. I remember they put him in a match against King Curtis, and poor old Curtis didn't know what to do with him. Like, he couldn't do much with this huge behemoth bodybuilder guy. But there were lots and lots of fantastic guys who came through New Zealand. I've actually got scrapbooks of every show I ever attended at, like at the town hall in Dunedin, and you'd get the newspaper cutout and you'd put it there, and then you'd write down all the results of all the matches and whatever. And I think one of the greatest thrills I had, there was and to the best of my knowledge, certainly in my young lifetime at that stage, there was a NWA world title match between Harley Race and Jack Claiborne Jr., who wrestled and extensively here in New Zealand and Australia, and I believe he still lives in Sydney. And they had the ring up on the stage, and there was only sort of like 3 ringside seats, in 3 different directions. And I happened to be in I think it was either the first or the second row with my sister, and Harley Race was peering around the curtain, from behind us, looking at the matches. And I wanted his autograph, but we had nothing to bloody write it on. Like, he didn't go prepared. And my sister had a checkbook. And I said, give me the checkbook. Give me the checkbook. So on the back of the check, he did his autograph. I think I got him, Les Thornton, and Jack Claiborne. And I still got them in a scrapbook somewhere. But that was my first world title match. And ever since I saw that match, which it might sound a bit silly in a small town in New Zealand, a world title match, but I wanted to be a wrestler up until I saw that match. And then when I saw what those two put each other through and the brilliance of the match, I thought, I don't think I could ever do this. So, but that was, but yeah, that was sort of a very long story answer on how On the Mat came about.
Nice. Talking about NWA champions, I'm not sure if I got his name right. I think he's from New Zealand. Wasn't Peter O'Connor an NWA champion?
Pat O'Connor.
Pat O'Connor, that's the one.
Yeah, Pat O'Connor. He look, before my time. I'm not as old as I look, but he made it. One of the few Kiwis I think that made it really big over there. The other one, and we'll get on to Pat O'Connor in a sec, but Tony Garea, of course, which was Tony Garcia over here. His brother John wrestled extensively in New Zealand and over here in Australia. And I don't know if you could almost class him as a Kiwi, but got most of his start, of course, was the Paramount High Chief Peter Maivia. And he did a lot of his early work in New Zealand, and as most of the Samoans did. Another one who actually went over from New Zealand, and although he didn't make it super big, but he was on WWE for a little bit, not much. He wrestled more of their live shows, did a lot of the Hawaiian shows, which Steve Rickard was helping to promote with Peter Maivia, and then his late wife Leah was Sivarafi Teogaga, which over here was called Max Tom Barker or something along those lines. But anyway, but Pat O'Connor was without doubt the best of the lot. There was a guy even before him, Lofty Blomfield, but way before my time. But Pat O'Connor was a major headline act in America, won the NWA title. If memory serves me, and I might be a bit rusty, Les, but may have won it on more than one occasion. I'd have to check that. But yeah, he did very well and ended his career over there and passed away, I think, not that long ago, I don't think.
Oh, yeah. Tony's been a long time road agent for WWE, WWF, hasn't he? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, well, he was, but I read, and I didn't realise or know, but and I'm hoping it's not true, but I did read that he passed away about a year ago.
Oh.
So I'm not 100% sure, so I'm hoping the information was wrong, but I read that he passed away because I was reading something and they go, the late Tony Garea. As a matter of fact, actually, no, it was on on SmackDown or something. They were saying something just recently. They were talking about, because, we've got a few of the Aussies and Kiwis over there in WWE at the moment, and they were saying something about someone, and they go, it was when, what's her name? Has just come back. I've just gone blank for a minute. The lady wrestler who's just come back, she's on with Madcap Moss. Help me out, Les. What's her name? I've just gone terribly blank. She was on yesterday, as a matter of fact. But they were saying, you know who I mean. Tenille.
Tenille Dashwood. Emma.
Yeah, Emma. And Michael Cole actually was saying, from the same hometown as the late Tony Garea. And I thought, he's obviously passed away. And this was only a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So I'm assuming he has, mind you. Well, not that that's very old, but he would have been he'd have to have been in probably mid 70s, I suppose, mid to late 70s of age. Because he was over there wrestling in 72, 73. So in 1972, 73. So, I mean, that was quite some years ago. That was 40-something years ago. So he was probably in his 70s when he passed away. So not really old, but I don't know.
It's quite fascinating. I'll have to look into it. Because I haven't really been following WWE.
Look, I don't, and no doubt we're going to talk about this, and I won't sort of preempt too much of what I'm going to say, but I keep up with it just to see what's going on, but I basically have it on in the background while I'm on Facebook. There's something, I must say, I love the story they're doing with Roman Reigns and the bloodline, and then I think there's a bit of interest in that particular story. It's probably about the only major story that I'm interested to see what they do. And you can see, the turn's going to start now with Sami Zayn and the whole bit. So that sort of started yesterday. And I'm just interested to see where it goes. I believe, they'll turn on Zayn and him and Owens will hook up and end up winning the tag titles off the Usos. That's my prediction. But I'm not on my own in that prediction. But that interests me. I like the fact that since Vince has gone out of creative, I look at things from a lot of different perspectives. If you just look at the commentary perspective, it has changed so dramatically. They will now talk about, where a guy or girl has been, what they've done, the other federations they've been in. It's not like they didn't exist before WWE. So from a commentary point of view, I love that. They're very open, they're honest, because they know that the fans know. I mean, there's no such thing as kayfabe anymore. Internet killed all of that. Everybody knows everything. The super marks will still believe, but, you need them. But so I think, it's changed for the better in that respect.
Yeah, I think under, yep.
Yeah, no, go on, sorry.
Yeah, I think under Triple H, he's been more sort of like open, a bit like Tony Khan and some of the other mainstream companies, to like letting talent wrestle other companies and promoting like wrestling in the whole.
Yeah, look, I think it's look, we're probably going to stray. I do that a lot when I'm talking to people on interviews. I go all over the place. They keep me on track. But I think what Triple H has done is certainly a breath of fresh air. There's still a long way to go because even from his own lips, Triple H has said he's been disappointed with all the ones he's brought back. None of them have really broken out and done something super special. Like there's no Rock, there's no Stone Cold amongst any of them in terms of character and presence and whatever. So they've been a bit disappointed with a lot of the ones they've brought back. But I do think it's a breath of fresh air in terms of creative, although some of the stories still are not making much sense. As I said, the only one that's really capturing my interest from a business point of view is the whole Bloodline story, because I think that's been very, very well done. But on the opposite side of that, the whole Bray Wyatt thing, this thing, I've got bored with it already and it hasn't even started. Like, it's just taking too long to get to the bloody point, which a lot of people say about me sometimes. But you know what I mean? It's just too long. Now, maybe at the Royal Rumble when he faces this LA Knight, it might sort of pick up a bit. But, gee, it's been a long time coming. So from that point of view, I think it's better. Certainly, as I alluded to earlier, the commentary. I think the commentary is a lot more better. It's a lot more honest. It's a lot more open. It's the sort of commentary I enjoy listening to as a, former commentator. And I want to talk about that a bit later, but if we can. Tony Khan, look, I got to be honest, I haven't seen much of AEW. I watched one of their pay-per-views and we did a review on it, Mike Manson and myself, and that we do reviews, podcast reviews on the wild world of wrestling. But we do reviews, and I did one and I thought, look, it wasn't bad. But the problem he's got, you got a situation where, Dad's got unlimited money. So I'm a rich kid playing around in the pool. And I'm not having a crack at him for that. Good luck to him. But if you're going to sign up every single person that left WWE and some of the others and this, that, the next thing, and then don't use them, I don't get it. As a performer, and I've met and worked with enough wrestlers, internationals and local, to know they want to perform. So sure, you might be on some multi-million-dollar contract and you're just sitting at home getting paid to do nothing, but I can't imagine one of them would be happy about that. If he employed me on $1 million a year to commentate, Jesus, you'd grab it with both hands and you go. But then if I was always in the background and I never got to commentate, hey, okay, sure, I'm going to get me $1 million, but I'm not doing anything. I'm not doing what I do. I'm not performing. I'm not out there or whatever. So I don't get it. I just think he's digging a hole for himself where, he will start to lose most of them when they come off contract.
Oh, definitely. I'm going to reference to what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
The company you're saying that Dazzler Dunlop toured with, I believe he mentioned him in his book, World Class Wrestling.
Yes.
Is that the name of the company?
Yeah. The one, I'm sure it was World Class Wrestling. That Tony Vuknik, there we go, just came to me in the flesh. I actually had the pleasure of working with Tony on some of the local NAW shows. He was working as I'm not sure what the arrangement was, but let's call him a co-promoter at NAW with George the Hitman Julio. And Tony and I worked fairly closely together on that. I was doing a lot of the booking at that time on the show and that. And Tony, although I lost contact with him, and I really don't know what happened, but once he left NAW, I sort of just lost contact, as you do in this business. If you're not front and square, people just forget you. But he was good. He had some very, very good ideas. He wasn't scared to put the money in. He was a businessman. But it's a shame World Class didn't kick on. I think it had the potential to kick on. But again, I wasn't overly involved at the time, so I don't really know what happened. So you never want to speculate because, it's not right.
Yeah, do you reckon it was sort of like a similar scenario to AEW in some ways? Or
no, because look, AEW's got the biggest names. They've got TV. They've got all of that. World Class didn't really have much of that. Not long after, but you might remember, and I can't think of the name of it, and you might because your memory's probably better than mine. But when they bought that promotion out here and Mark Lewin was heading it up, he was high risk, yeah. Well, that had some opportunity, but they botched that something unbelievably. For a start, you had two commentators who didn't know anything about the business. You had Michael Roberts, the ex-footballer, and Paul Jennings, who just made fun of it. A little known story. Here's a scoop for your podcast, your Good Cuppa one. The week before it got cancelled, me and Gene Gatto and myself were actually called and booked to become the commentators for Channel 9 for the ongoing shows. And we were booked as late as the Thursday. And by Friday night, Channel 9 had pulled the plug on the whole thing. So we got to within about 48 hours of sitting there doing the Channel 9 commentary for it. And it's not the first time Gene and I have been booked for something really massive and then it just didn't go on. When the Americans came out, when it was the TNA crew came out, and I can't think who they were called, but they had all the guys out here and then Borash was with them, Jeremy Borash.
Oh, World Wrestling All-Stars?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Well, I did a fair bit of work for Andrew McManus, and he actually asked me to host the press conference at Crown Casino. So we had all the newspapers, the TV, everything. So I hosted the press conference there, and there was Bret Hart here and all of them. But just prior to that, we'd been doing a show a monthly show at Crown Casino, which Rowan Herbstreit was behind. And we had Booker T's brother, Stevie Ray, and the Road Dogg, Jesse James, and they were coming out to do some promos. So I get in the ring, I introduce each of them, and then you do the whole promo thing. These guys are going to be at wherever it was. I can't remember now, Festival Hall, I suppose, or somewhere. But, da-da-da, on this date and da-da-da. And then we'd arrange this little thing where Gene had come out, be the heel commentator and try and upset Stevie Ray or something. And then a few of the boys had run out from the back and all of that. So they saw what we did and how hot it went over. And then we were upstairs in the green room And we were sitting there talking to Stevie Ray and more so than Road Dogg. I think Road Dogg was down at the bar. And we probably spent about an hour sitting there talking to him. And, you know, he was brilliant. He was absolutely brilliant. You know, we were talking to him about Booker T's run. And he said, look, I don't know what they obviously saw something in him and they kept him going, you know, at WWE, and then became King of the Ring and all of that. And he was just really, really open. But after we did that skit or that promo, having been already booked and signed to do the commentary on the, I was at the tennis centre. We were booked to do that. At the very last minute, they said, oh, Jeremy Borash wants to do the commentary now, and he's going to do it with Jerry Lawler. And we thought, oh. And we thought, why is that? Anyway, we later found out Borash, well, as we were told, so, you know, again, rumour maybe, thought, shit, these guys are really going over hot, and apparently didn't like it. He felt maybe some of his limelight was potentially, now that's what I was told, whether it's true or not. So anyway, the promoters at the time turned around and said, look, you've done a lot of work on this, da-da-da-da-da. Yeah, they gave us tickets, had us backstage, met all the guys, although I'd already met them at the press conference. And we were just there as sort of in the back with the boys and sort of spectating the show. So there was about 3 or 4 times we'd come up very close. As a matter of fact, I had one phone call. I was working at the time as a area manager for Australia Post. And I get a phone call from New York City, from Andrew McManus. And he says to me, I've booked these shows. I've got all this going. I've got da-da-da-da-da. I want you and your mate to do the commentary. You do the ring announcing, and then you and your mate do the commentary and all that. And I said to him, absolutely, no problem at all. And put the phone down, rang Gene. I said, you'll never guess who just rang me from New York City. He goes, New York City? I said, yeah, Andrew McManus. Oh, shit, what's he want? I said, he wants us. Oh, really? And, you know, so there was about 3 or 4 times we almost got our foot in the door and it just got slammed shut. So, but, you know, it was not, I guess it was nice as local boys to be thought of at that level at the time. But we just never quite cracked that big one. I mean, Gene did a couple of ring announcing gigs with WWE when they came out in the 80s. And we'll talk about it later, no doubt. But I was very fortunate in 92, I think it was, to do the whole Wrestle Riot tour. And that was just, still goes down out of my 30-odd years as my greatest experience. So, you know, for a couple of local boys who very rarely got paid and did it all for love, we had a good time. Made a lot of great friends. You know, people who are still very close now. You know, people that I speak to and see on a semi-regular basis. Like Gene and I see each other all the time. You know, we're very close. But you know, people like Jim Demiris, Sam Rossi, Tony Marino, Little Vic, all the boys from that era. You know, even the younger guys we brought in, like you know, Blade Runner and Psycho and Jesse Valentine, Alan Dunlop, of course, Kenny's brother, and that, all still great mates. And, you know, people, even if you don't see them for 6 months, the minute you see them, it's just like you saw each other yesterday. And it's, you know, there's friendships there that go over 30 years. So I'm very, very grateful for the time and the fun and the experience I had, even though it cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars as a promoter and then really never getting paid as a commentator. But you didn't care. You had your job. Yeah, your job was your job. This was just hanging out with the boys, having a bloody good time, trying to put on a bloody good show.
Awesome stuff. They'll probably lead into what I'll ask you after I quickly ask you this. Like after World Championship Wrestling, with like the companies like High Risk Championship Wrestling, World Wrestling All Stars, where do you think we fell short? Where we looked like we had potential?
The biggest problem, I think, and I don't really know for sure because you weren't intricately involved, but it's like anything. If you can't get the backing of the media, if you can't get some sort of TV, if you can't get something, it is hard. It is really, really hard. Wrestling didn't have a great name, particularly in that late, because when the World Championship Wrestling finished in the end of 78, and we're talking from the end of 78 till about 88, 89, wrestling didn't have a very good name because you had would-be promoters going around ripping people off left, right and centre. And I'll tell you what some of the things that happened. You had people booking advertising in newspapers and not paying. You had people taking advantage of clubs, promoting this, that, and the next thing. And, we'll bring in this many and we've got all our fans and, we'll get you 1,000 people in here and we'll do this. And you fell short. And there was a few people who did it. There was one or two that were notorious and had an absolutely horrid name, and I won't mention them, even though they've passed on now, but still. So the people like me who came along that wanted to run it as a legitimate business, and I did. I was registered. Everything went through the books. We did everything properly. People would say to you, you've got to pay up front or we're not doing anything. We've been burnt too many times by promoters and this and that. And then it was very hard because, you got your venue, you've got your ring crew, you've got the wrestlers' fees, you've got the insurance, then the advertising. The advertising's a killer. That was so expensive. I mean, I remember I did a tour of 4 towns. We did Swan Hill, Mildura, Bendigo, Ballarat over a 5-day period. And you got, accommodation costs and minibuses and this and that. And then you had to book the TV. And back then, like Mildura still had their own TV, like Good Morning Mildura or whatever it was called. And I drove Mario up and, we went on Good Morning Mildura and were, promoting the shows. I bought the town. I bought, half-page ads in the newspaper every day for a week or more, radio ads, you name it. But you had to pay for everything up front. And then if you didn't get it, and then you had to have the wages ready for the boys, whether or not you got a crowd or not. Now, I was different to some promoters who would turn around and say, sorry, boys, we've had a really poor thing. This is all I can give you. Now, I had a set fee with every boy and girl, and regardless of whether there was 1 or 1,000, their envelopes were ready when we got to the show. So all that's up front. And if you didn't get a good crowd, you were screwed. And 3 of those 4 shows, even though we bought the town, you couldn't have done any more in the town other than knock on everybody's bloody door and tell them. We even actually had pamphlets and letterboxes. We had newspaper, we had radio, we had me and Mario on TV and radio and everything. Yeah, we got some really poor houses. That tour alone back in 1989 cost me over $15,000. That's a lot of money back then. That was half a house. Oh, well, no, maybe a quarter. But you know what I mean? That was big money.
Yeah, far out. That would have been like a bit annoying.
Well, it was. But, in my first year, I did over 100,000, which in those days was 2 houses.
Yeah.
It was 2 houses. But I was determined to make it work. And it was super, super professional. Like we had the most professional, beautiful looking ring, even to the point, because I have OCD, so I'm very particular. So you'd have like the red corner, the blue corner. The red corner had red turnbuckles and a red tag rope. The blue corner, blue turnbuckles, blue rope. The 2 neutral corners were green and green turnbuckles. We had a beautiful ring mat and then the apron and the poles, everything. We had proper bell. We all looked the part. We were meticulous in our planning and right down to the entrance music. Like it was a very, very professional production for its time. We're not talking now where they all got the big Megatrons up and, the whole bit. There was none of that back then anyway. And don't forget also back then there was no internet. So you couldn't promote online. You had to reach the public by sitting there typing out 100 bloody letters and sending it to every radio station with tickets in it. buy newspaper, all of that, posters up everywhere, all of that. There was no, hey, let's get online, get someone to draw up a nice looking poster and stick it online and promote it all over the place. There was none of that. It was a very, very different and difficult time without any sort of media backing. Like, you had to beg to get a story in the local paper, and then they'd only do it if you bought advertising with them, So you'd have to buy a half a page ad just to get maybe a column. So people don't realise how tough it was and the hard slog we actually went through to keep wrestling relevant and keep it going, because we knew we were going to be passing the torch on at some point. Like, all the boys that I worked with, I mean, none of us are doing it now. It's all the younger guys now, but, that was kept alive by people like myself and Vuknik and everybody else that came down the pike. Ken and Bob and Sydney and Rackman, and there were hundreds, well, dozens, all over the place, putting their hard-earned in to try and make it work to keep the business going. And I would like to talk about it a little bit later, but I've got some very, very definite and probably quite unpopular views on today's wrestling in Australia, but we'll get to that, I'm sure.
I'll just say hi to my mum, because my mum just said interesting history.
Hello, Mother. Gail.
Hey, Mum.
Hope you enjoyed the show.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you, like, speaking from passion, because I can see you've got a lot of passion for it. What do you enjoy most from when you're promoting?
Well, I suppose what gives a promoter the greatest thrill is seeing a reasonable crowd, because all the promoting you've done sort of come to it. But I think the thing that, if you said to me, you're going to start up again tomorrow and you're going to blow another 100,000 in the next 12 months, I'll do it again, because I had a lot of fun. I worked hard. I worked 18 hours a day, 7 days a week. I worked bloody hard at it. I sort of probably a bit like what people say Vince McMahon did. That's all he did. But that was my life. But I loved it. I was doing something I genuinely loved. But with a business approach, of course, because you're talking big dollars in those days. But I think it was the camaraderie. I think it was the friends that I made, the laughs we had. The things that happen on the road. What do they say? What happens on the road stays on the road. I mean, we never had anything super bad or anything like that. There was certainly no drugs. There was no, drunks. There was nothing like that. But we just had a lot of fun on the road. I don't think he'll mind me saying, at least I hope he won't mind me saying, but there was more than one trip where little Vic, the referee, who everybody just loves, he is just one of the most decent blokes. But, they'd strip him down naked and throw him off the bus on the side of the road and leave him naked on the side of the road. And you'd come back for him, of course. But just little things, that were fun. And these days, all the tree huggers would be totally against and saying we're messing with them and this and that. But it was a very different time. It was a very different era. But I loved and then the night when the show came on. A very interesting story, if I may, which leads into why I get so much enjoyment out of the commentary. I was never going to be a commentator. I'd never planned for any of that. I just wanted to promote. Anyway, that very first show I did in 89, the booker at the time had booked Gene Gatto to do the commentary. And the booker told me, we've got this guy trained by Jack Little. He's been on TV. He's the best in the business. I said, good, get him. And he said, got him. He's all good, Well, of course, I found out years later when Gene and I finally did work together and became the best of friends, and I was best man at his wedding and the whole bit, and we're like brothers even now. He was never coming because he had a real beef with the booker, and he told the booker, there's no way I'm coming. But the booker, who was a liar, and I had to get rid of in the end. But, he said, no, he's going. And then it was about 20 minutes to showtime. where's this bloody commentator? Oh, I don't know. He said he was coming. Anyway, a man who became a very, very good friend and a man who I love dearly from Sydney, Bob Blassick, was in Melbourne. Now, I didn't know Bob. I'd never met Bob, but he was there. I don't know how he got there or why he was there. I never really asked. But anyway, he said to me, well, you're the only one in the suit. You're going to have to do it. I said, I've never done anything like that. I don't know what to do. He goes, don't worry. He goes, you go and do the ring announcing and then come back to the table. He goes, I'll sit with you on the table and, you know, I'll guide you through. I thought, oh, shit. Okay. So I get in the ring and I'm standing there and I got the microphone. I thought, oh, crap. Anyway, we got through the first show and Bob helped me tremendously. So I said to this guy who will remain nameless, the booker, who I absolutely detest with a passion. I don't detest many people, but he's one. Anyway, what happened? Oh, I don't know. I'll find out. I said, well, for Christ's sake, make sure he's on the next show. Yeah. And then I spoke to him. Yeah, he's all booked. He's fine. Well, of course, Gene didn't turn up. And I thought, shit, here we go again. So, and this time I was on my own. There was no Bob Blassick there. There was no one. And I thought, shit, what am I going to do? So I just got up and did it. Same thing happened third show. And I said to him, listen, well, you know. Anyway, by the fourth show, I thought, actually, I'm quite enjoying this. I thought I might save a wage. I said, don't bother booking that commentator anymore. I'm going to do it and I'll save a wage. And that's actually how I got into it. There was never any intention of doing it. For lack of a better word, self-taught. Although I had done radio school because I was told I had a great face for radio. So that's how I actually got into it. And so the commentary on the night was the thing that gave me the most pleasure because contrary to what a lot of people sometimes say and some of the stuff I've seen written on the internet about Gene and I, that, you know, we made it all about us and this, that, and the next thing, which was totally false because we weren't performing in the ring. And I want to get to that too in a minute. But so it was about trying to call it from the fans' perspective, but with some information and knowledge so that the fans could get they could get right into it and feel as though you're saying what they would say or what they're thinking or what they're seeing and to get them involved. And more importantly was to get the feuds over, the stories over, and the guys over. And I believe we did that really quite well. So it was doing that. And a few years down the track, maybe late 90s, early 2000s, I don't know, you lose track. There was this promoter that came along who was known to Gene and a few of the boys, but I didn't know him. But he wanted to do some promoting. But he asked Gene and I to do all the booking. So we'd meet about 3 times a week. But rather than book just a show at a time, we would sort of book, 3 shows at a time. We'd do 1 show a month for this guy. So we'd book. So we'd say, okay, Peter and Les, you're going to hook up on the first card, da-da-da-da-da. That's going to lead to this on the second show. And then it's going to culminate in this on the third or the fourth, depending on how the story was going. So we actually knew if you and I were doing a match or a series, we knew what we would do the next 3 or 4 shows. And we could plan accordingly. We had the story written for 3 or 4 shows. And we had some of the best young guys at that time, like, you know, King Harker, who was, you know, over 300 pounds and would do a big frog splash from the top of a cage. You know, we had Psycho, we had Blade, we had Johnny Doyle was still working. We had a lot of really, really good guys. And we had a crew. And the thing that gave us the greatest pleasure was we would finish that show on the very same night. They were selling 150 to 200 tickets for the next show in a month on that night for the next show. Such was the booking, the storylines and whatever. And I think from Gene and my perspective, that was the greatest thrill we got because, you know, it was working. It was working really, really well. And Eke Club out at Keilor. Can you imagine in today's wrestling, where at the end you had to sell $5 standing room tickets only because the place was absolutely jam-packed. You know, we had guys, again, like the ones I mentioned, and Bradman, of course. On those shows, Bradman sort of had a bit of a bikie gimmick, a bit of a Les Roberts gimmick. And he'd come out on this massive Harley and drive around the ring. And, you know, we had, Greg and Bully the Brawler Heasley. We had, lots of guys. We would pack it out every single month, like literally $5 standing room tickets at the back against the wall. And they were shows we were booking, and they were fantastic times. I mean, we never got any money for it, and we didn't care. It was having a full house and the crowd going absolutely off their head, loving it. And that gave us more joy than if you'd given us $1,000 on the night, so to speak. And that was the greatest pleasure I got.
Awesome stuff. Are you familiar with Kayfabe Commentary's guest booker series at all?
No.
I'm not going to sort of go into it too much, but a New Zealand wrestler booker who's like popular from New Zealand done an episode. Do you remember Sheepherder Luke?
Yeah.
Yeah, he done a pretty good episode of guest booker. I thought I'd reference him before because I kept forgetting. I was trying to think of their name because people know him in WWF as the Bushwhackers, but I prefer him as the Sheepherders. A lot better in their days.
Yeah, I see. Was it Luke who's trying to get into the Royal Rumble? He's getting people to sign a petition or something?
Yeah, I was behind that. I thought it'd be interesting, but a lot of people are like, "Oh, he's too old."
Well, gee, he'd have to be 80, wouldn't he?
Oh, hard to say.
I reckon he'd be close to 80. But I believe he still does like a Legends circuit or something. But, yeah, but I mean, power to him if he can still do it. But I couldn't see WWE bringing a near 80-year-old in, although, you know, I mean, he's no Ric Flair, but, yeah, Ric Flair just had a match a few months ago, but that almost killed him.
Oh, yeah, I remember that event too.
Yeah, I think it was sad. I understand his passion. I really do. And it's been his whole life. And when you take someone's whole life away from them, you think, shit, what do I do now? I get it. And he was probably, you know, if not the best in the top few, but I think he should have just kept going out the way he did in that WrestleMania match with Shawn Michaels. I think that was his farewell. That was his last match. It was a good match given all the circumstances. He probably should have just gone out like that. I mean, he was unconscious twice in that last match.
Yeah, dehydration or something I heard, but I also think Ric Flair's still trying to party, and the booze might have actually got to him a bit as well because he drinks a lot of booze.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know he trained hard and, you know, he's still a genuine superstar and nothing but respect. I have that much respect for him, Laz. You may not know, but every show I'm on, I always come out to his music, not because I think I'm Ric Flair, but it's actually a sign of respect for one of the greatest that ever walked the aisle. And I open every show with his music. People think, oh, you're coming out to Ric Flair's music. No one ever bothered to ask me. But the actual reason is always came out as a mark of respect to open the show, you know, to his music. Such was my respect for him. Because you got to remember that in WA champions, they were in my opinion, were the only real world champions because they travelled and defended their belts Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, Europe, anywhere and everywhere, South Africa, Japan. Yeah, they travelled extensively and defended the title against the very best in that country. So when they went to New Zealand, for example, I think it was, well, actually both Harley Race and Ric Flair in New Zealand defended against Steve Rickard, Jack Claiborne, Mark Lewin came in for it. Over here in Australia, there's the most famous of all with the Ron Miller matches in Harley Race, the 60-minute draws, and Rick Martel over here. And like they would go and wrestle the absolute cream of the crop of every single country and the travel schedule and the whole thing. And like they were real world champions as opposed to AWA and WWE who were, no disrespect, but more like territory champions. You know, they certainly didn't travel. Well, WWE not in the early days. They do now, but you know, didn't travel like the NWA guys. So to me, they were a real world champion.
Yeah, even WWF, WWE, WWF owe like their history to NWA. There's like a lot of lineage from NWA when it comes to like wrestling.
Yeah, well, Vince McMahon Senior was, if memory serves me, from what I understand, was on the initial board of NWA, and then they sort of broke away and had. It was a bit like, you know, you see some of these programs on TV and series as like with the drugs, and like, this is my territory, that's your territory, and almost that was, you know. And Vince Senior did incredibly well with his territory. I mean, some of the people he had there. But then Vince Jr., to his credit, made wrestling a worldwide name. He made it as popular as, I mean, none of us ever thought it'd be as popular as it was. And in its heyday, I mean, everybody knew WWE, or WWF then became WWE. Everybody knew who it was. They knew who Hogan was. They knew, you know, it wasn't an underground thing anymore. And it wasn't one of those things, oh, you go to wrestling. Like, you know, they brought in Cyndi Lauper and all of those. And, you know, credit where credit's due. He really put international wrestling on the map. The downside, of course, of that is it killed the territories. Number one, which was sad, and it looks like we're going to end up back at the territories if the news we're hearing today is true, that they've now appointed, WWE have now appointed an agency to actually try and sell WWE, and there's some very interested bidders in that. Fox is very interested in buying it. Comcast, which is the parent company of Peacock, they're very interested in buying it, and they already own the network rights to 2026. And believe it or not, as late as about 2 hours ago, the ministry in Saudi Arabia that gets all the shows over there in Saudi Arabia, they're actually very interested in buying it, because they're saying that so far the Saudi Arabian ministry has made over 400 million from all the tours that have gone on over there, which is more than the 38 WrestleManias combined. So there's a lot of interest, and so if they sell it, which they're looking to do, they want to sell it before the TV rights come up, because they don't want to renegotiate TV rights if they don't own it, obviously. What worries me is, does it become another WCW? Do you have somebody, like a Ted Turner owning it, but you got, like an Eric Bischoff type running it, unlimited funds, and do we end up going from wrestling being on top of the world right back down to the bottom of the world, and then just territories open up again? Who knows? And then to get TV again and to get the popularity, it'll be a bit like Australia. It'll start to drip off. And then what happens? So I think there's a very strong possibility we could do the full circle, and I think that'd be a terrible, terrible shame, all because a guy couldn't keep his what in his pants, because that's all. Well, that's what it's come from, and even so, it's going okay now. But he's saying, well, if I'm not on the board, which he's now back on the board with his two former vice presidents or whatever, I'm going to veto everything. And he goes, it's almost like, well, if I'm not there and I can't be involved, I'll bankrupt the company. And he said that. So I think it's really, really sad. I know it's Vince's house. It's Vince's company. He built it. I get all of that. And as a former promoter, I can sort of understand what he's saying. But it's almost like, well, if I can't play, I'm taking me bat and ball and going home. And that's going to affect, thousands of people in the industry and millions around the world. I'm not sure he's doing the right thing at any stretch of the imagination. I mean, why doesn't he just sell his share? I know he owns 80%, so effectively it is the company, but Yeah, it's going to be a very interesting few months.
Oh. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, like, if that happens. Like, I sort of have a love-hate for Vince McMahon Jr.,
Yeah.
but, like, who's going to replace him regarding, being the Don of wrestling, so to speak?
Well, but do you need one? I mean, if you've got WWE have got some fantastic people there. Yeah, like Triple H and Shawn Michael doing creative. You got William Regal's back there now. Is it in some sort of what is it? Some junior vice president or some sort of role like that because his son's
some fancy role.
Now you got there's people there that know the business and understand the business, that more importantly respect the business. If you don't respect it, you can't manage it. And I think Fox or someone bought it. It's okay for them to own it and to some degree obviously run it, but I'm hoping they're going to be smart enough to turn around and have proper, smart wrestling business people involved. Because when WCW came in, was it Jim Herd who was, he wanted to get rid of Ric Flair, and they had that big stand for 2 years, and you can't have another Jim Herd because it will go. You need. Yeah, look, everything needs management and you've got to be accountable and the dollars are going to stack up. But you could manage a company or a business, but still have, the operations working efficiently, effectively, and run by wrestling people who understand, storylines and gimmicks and characters and, all of that. So if they can somehow keep talent and creative separate, it's still in the hands of wrestling people, then it won't really matter who owns it to some degree, I don't think. Look, all they want to see, the people who own it, is a return on the investment. That's all any business wants to see, is a return on the investment. So as long as there's a return on the investment and the dollars are coming through, they'll let the wrestling people do what they do. It's only when it's not happening that they'll step in.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Me and Dazzler Dunlop had a similar conversation. We were talking about AEW having like a lot of people with experience like Arn Anderson, whatnot, in backstage roles.
Yeah.
And we were saying, is Tony Khan utilising them as well as he should be? And do you reckon that would be the same with WWE, say if Disney bought them?
Yeah.
Would they be able to utilise veterans more?
Well, Khan, look, I don't know the guy. I've never spoken to him. I've never met him. And to be honest with you, I don't know a lot about him, if I'm being totally honest. But from what I can see from the outside looking in, and I don't know if this is a bit harsh, but he's sort of like a rich kid playing. I don't think he really, I think he's a mark. And I think he's booking like a mark, because from what I'm seeing and hearing, there's no real consistency to the booking. There's storylines all over the place. People got too much say. Now, what truly happened behind the scenes with CM Punk and the Young Bucks and all that, we might never know or whatever. But the minute you give creative or total creative to some of the guys, i.e. what they did with Hogan at WCW, that is a recipe for disaster. Gene and I will go to our graves saying the same thing, that the greatest bookers you will have are people who are not actively in the ring and have got nothing to gain personally, because they will put a show on for the fans. So if you and I are booking, Les, a show, and we're not active performers, you and I will put on a show that we think, wow, this is a great show. Here's the storylines, how it's going. Here's how this is going. We've got no personal involvement. But if you and I were, tag team champions or something like that, you're going to end up booking around what's going to suit you and the people who you bring to face you. You can't do it properly if you're actively involved in the ring. You need to be one step removed and saying what is going to be good for the show, what is going to be good for the company, not what's good for me. So you cannot, in my opinion, and you should not, give creative to the workers. The workers are the workers. They're the wrestlers. By all means, have input. Absolutely have input. So, you might have a CM Punk come saying, look, I'd like to do this and that. And if you think that's going to fit what your vision for it'll be, no problem. But if you think, well, that doesn't make sense, that's stupid, why would we do that? Then you've got to have the balls to say no. No, this just doesn't fit where we're going, what we're doing. And you cannot. It is an absolute recipe for disaster. Look what happened with WCW and Hogan and the NWO and all that.
Oh.
Like you can't. It's just, like Hogan wouldn't put anyone over. I mean, you had the whole it was basically an NWO show. And
finger poke.
Well, the faction became bigger than the business, and you can't do that. How can you do that?
Oh.
And then you get, rumblings in the dressing room, and other guys don't get opportunities, and you lose good talent. And, it's like they say, even in my game, like I'm in recruitment and that, and in business, if you get on things like LinkedIn and whatever, they say people do not leave a bad job. They leave bad management. And that's true. I very recently, about 3.5 months ago, I think it'd be, maybe close to 4 months, I think next week, joined a company. I'm doing the same job effectively as I was in the last one. But in the last one, it was a very, very toxic environment and a horrible, horrible manager who couldn't manage. And I'm now in a company that is 110% opposite. I've got the best manager I've ever had in my whole working career. I'm in a great environment. I would never want to leave. I can see me staying there till I retire. Oh. So I'm still doing the same job, but I'm doing it in a company. So it's, so it holds true that you still, like if you're a wrestler, whether you wrestle at AEW, WWE, New Japan, you're still a wrestler. But it's who you're wrestling for. So it's your boss, it's your company. So that's what I'm saying, where it holds true that people they don't leave bad jobs necessarily, they leave bad management. And that is why, to illustrate the point in a business sense as well, you cannot have active competitors with total creative. You can't. Doesn't matter how desperate. I mean, look how desperate they were to get CM Punk. Where is he now? It doesn't. It's a short-term gain for a long-term problem.
Yeah, like with the Ric Flair thing, like when I was saying before, too, of the booze and stuff, I didn't mean he was drunk in the ring, but because he's a heavy drinker, it gasses you out. And so, like what you're saying about wrestlers promoting themselves in events, yeah, like Ric Flair is a great example for the last event he promoted. Unfortunately, even though he's one of the greatest of all time, like it ended up being a bit of a flop regarding him fainting in the ring and stuff like that.
Well, the other three had to carry him, really. I mean, Andrade and Jeff Jarrett, to his credit, Jarrett really kept that match alive. Jay Lethal, of course, but, Rick had been training with Jay for months in preparation. So they all knew what was going on, and they had to sort of work on the fly when he couldn't do his bit. And I just think for such a genuine superstar to potentially be remembered like that, I just think it's sad. He went out. He went out in that WrestleMania match. He lost. He was on Raw the next night, and he said, "I will never wrestle again." On Raw the next night, and everyone came out from the back one at a time, and the Horsemen, and then at the very end, Vince, and he got the best send-off you could ever dream of in wrestling. Like, you had the cream, you had the Undertaker paying homage to you, had Vince, you had all of these people. Man, go out on top. There's other things you can do in the business. You could get involved behind the thing. You could be managing. You could be commentating. You could be, booking. There's a lot of things you could do. and still stay involved. I mean, I know he did a bit of management and then he went over to TNA and da-da-da, and I know he loves it. And I love the commentary. I would commentate every single day still, but nobody wants to know me now because I'm old school. They don't want to, and I'd like to talk about that later too. But, when unfortunately the wrestling business worldwide, and I'm not having a crack at just Australia, but when you're in a position to book someone or you're active on a show or you're doing something, everybody wants to know you. As soon as you're not, you're yesterday's newspaper. Now, you may or may not be aware, about a year ago, or a bit over a year ago, 18 months ago, I was organising a WCW reunion. I don't know if you heard about that. And
I think I remember
I
that.
was trying to organise people, all those who were still alive from the WCW days, right through to the guys we started and we've brought through over the years and the current guys and that. And I spent 18 months almost non-stop working on this thing to get the right venue, to get accommodation, to get it the right, really decent 3-course meal and desserts and all that. I had some great people like Martin Heppel in Sydney who put together this, great CD for me of all the guys who have passed. We were going to have a bit of a remembrance thing for all the ones who had passed. We had a few announcements on the night we were going to do. We were talking to Tony Marino about launching his book there. We'd already spoken to Dazzler about having his book there. We were going to do a couple of very surprise Hall of Fame Legends Awards to people who didn't know they were even going to be there, but we just wanted them there, and then we were going to surprise them on the night. We had guest speakers organised from the day. It was going to be a brilliant, brilliant event to get everybody in Australian wrestling together for one night, have a fantastic evening, food, drink, the whole bit, And I had every man and his dog, people I've never even heard of from the wrestling game, contacting me and, yes, and this and that, and a few, look, if you want to put a ring up, we'll do a match and we'll do, all for their own benefit, a lot of them for their own benefit. And then when it came time to pay for the tickets, because I tried to keep ticket prices as low as possible for everybody to make it. So you imagine all of everything I've just said, plus the night being videoed and everything else at $80 a head. Right? It costs you more for 2 pizzas from bloody Uber Eats. But at $80 a head, when it's time to come to pay up, out of 180 people who'd said yes, 22 paid. 22 out of 180. And then when I had to cancel the evening because I'd already lost about $3,000 or $4,000 of my own money, getting deposits and everything set up and all the work that we had to do, I then obviously had to refund the 21 people or whatever it was. That took all bloody day. But I did that, online and that. And then all of these people who kept messaging me, and I've got it all on my phone, all these people who messaged me. You think I've heard one word from any of them since? Apart from, the ones who'd paid and were genuinely there, and we'd organised another dinner for a small group, which I thank Jesse Valentine for. He put together another dinner and we just had about 20 of us or so, and a couple of the boys had come from Sydney and whatever. But that's what it's like. And that's why it's very hard in Australia to get it going, because people don't look past their nose. They look at what's in it for me today. And people like myself and Gene and others who've been there, done that. We've done big houses. We've done big shows. We've been around. We know, and you offer your assistance, or you might offer, hey, you're looking for a commentator, you're looking for an announcer. They don't even have the courtesy to come back to you and say no. They don't want to know you. And while that attitude persists, they're going to keep wrestling in front of 50 people a night. Because you're not, we've got too many promotions for a start. I mean, how many are there in Victoria? About 14 or 15?
There's a lot of splinter cells.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is you got even call it a dozen. There's more. I know there's more. But let's say even a dozen. You got a dozen promoters all trying to get a slice of a very, very small pie. Because it's only the real diehards that go. Like people like me, you don't know when the shows are on or where they are. If you're not online all the time or whatever, you don't know. So people don't go. People have never heard of any of the guys on the show, really. And the young ones, to their discredit, I'm going to say this, and it's going to make me very unpopular, but I don't really care. They don't want to listen. They know it all. You're old school. You're an old, you're an old this, you're an old that. What would you know? You only think about the 80s, and which is not true. But they reckon their way is the right way, and it's not. Unfortunately, it's not. I don't know if I'm hijacking the interview because I tend to do that, but if we talk about today's wrestling, and I know we're going to, so I don't know if you want me to do that now or later, but I've got a wee bit I'd like to say about that.
Definitely. I'll definitely give you the opportunity. Before I lead into this question, I'm going to make reference to Ric Flair again.
Yeah.
I think where Ric Flair's fortunate because he's paid his dues and he's such a great. People probably put him in the category of Muhammad Ali. Remember how Muhammad Ali's always looked at it? And then people forget there was a period where he wasn't so great. Yeah. He made a comeback and he didn't do well, but people always look at him as like the greatest of all time.
Well, when he came back and he didn't do so great, is that he had his confidence absolutely shattered, and that was actually Triple H who brought him back. Him and Vince brought him back to work behind the scenes. He wasn't going to wrestle again when he came to WWE. And it was, as a matter of fact, I saw a documentary only a couple of days ago because, now we've got the WWE sort of network on, they got a WWE channel on Foxtel. And there was a documentary and I just came across it and I started watching it. I think it might have been Thursday or Friday night. Anyway. And he was saying, I came back to WWE, but it was all behind the scenes. And, my confidence was shattered. But when they'd set the ring up, at a live event, Triple H would say, come out in the ring with me. And, before the crowd was in there, and work with me, warm me up, stretch me out, and he only just slowly got back. And then they had that match of Ric Flair and Vince. For ownership of the company because, they had that gimmick that Ric Flair owned half of the company or something. He'd bought all the shares and blah, blah, blah. And they had a match to see who would actually own it and whatever. But that's how he got back involved. But his confidence was totally and absolutely shot because of people like Jim Herd and all of them who said, look, you don't want to know you. And he was literally the greatest of all time. So I don't feel so bad because I'm a nobody. And people don't want to know me now in the wrestling game. I'd still outdo most of the commentators around. No trouble. But you build the excitement, you build the wrestlers, you build the feuds, you do all that. See, there's none of that. I don't see much of that anymore. So it's a confidence thing. It's either confidence in yourself or people having the confidence in you that you can still go.
Yeah, definitely. I'll ask you this question because we've been leading up to it, and I'll lead into like the commentary stuff. But I'm going to ask you what goes into promoting an event.
Lots. Look, I think first and foremost, you got to have a good crew. You got to have a really good crew. If you don't have a good crew, what's the old saying, Les? You can't pull your socks up if you don't have any. It's a bit like the AFL at the moment. If you're a big AFL fan or a rugby league fan or whatever state you're in and whatever you follow, you might have one of the best clubs of all time. Like down here, Carlton was one of the big four. They were absolutely massive. And even Essendon, like massive, best coaches, all the money in the world, everything under the sun. But, they've gone through periods where, the list was very average. mate, you can't do anything with it. The talent is first and foremost. You've got to, now, not every promotion can have a Macho Man and a Stone Cold and a Hulk Hogan and whatever, and that's fine. But you need characters. I'd like to talk a bit about that too when we talk about today's wrestling later, but because I've got something I'm quite passionate about that I want to say, but you've got to have a good crew. So all of a sudden you and I are going to go and promote. We've got a really good crew, or we've got access to a really good crew, and in our heads we've already worked out a card to kick off our thing. So it'll be a really good card where you really can introduce your stars, or the one who's going to be your stars, and how we put them over and what we do. So you got to get the card sorted. But then you need to find the right venue that's going to, a good venue, accessible by public transport for those who don't drive in and whatever. So something reasonably accessible, a good venue, and of course the promotion. How do you actually promote it? Now, these days, in my day, it was newspaper ads, radio interviews on community radio, community TV, which I suppose you could still do, posters up all around that particular suburb and the windows of the shops and all of that. We even did things sometimes. I did a thing before my very first show at St. Albans where we were able to do a couple of matches at the Werribee Plaza Shopping Centre for them. And there, you'd have a couple of the guys doing a couple of matches. You might do 3 matches over about a 4-hour period, like, one at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock or something like that. And you'd be promoting, look, if you want to see more of these guys, if Mario was there, if you want to see Mario Milano on Saturday night at the St. Albans, you needed to, these days with social media, it's a bit easier, but you can still do a lot of the small stuff. I think you've got to get in. I think the other thing is you really want to, and I don't know these days because I haven't promoted for a long time, but, if you can get to the kids, because the kids bring the parents. So if you could somehow, get to the schools and do deals with the schools, like, for every ticket you sell, you get, $2 of the ticket or something like that. Or if they've got a huge big gymnasium or something at the school, try and do it there. But these days with all the tree huggers and, wrestling's violent and this and that, I don't know how you'd go. I'd need to investigate that a bit more. But the whole thing is having a really good crew, a really polished show, a very, very polished production, fantastic matches, and get as many people in as you can. And you're not going to get that many for the first one. But if the first one's really, really good and they can see some characters they like and all of that, they'll come again, but they'll tell people and they'll bring people. And then it'll just slowly build through a bit of word of mouth, but you must keep the promotion going and whatever. There's a lot of hard work. The ones who do it successfully, and I think there's a couple in Sydney who do it really, really well. It's hard work. It's non-stop. Anywhere you can get the word out, you get it out. I remember there was a show we were doing somewhere, and in one day, I started at 5:30 in the morning, and I did about 7 community radio stations that day. I did about 2 breakfasts, couple during the day, and a few in the afternoon. And from one station to the other, just driving around, getting on. We'd already made arrangements to come on, and you'd give them tickets to give away and all of that. But there's a lot of work involved. You imagine doing 7 different radio stations in a day, and you're working and you're trying to promote, and it was hard work, but a good show. So you could spend $1 million and promote the biggest show on earth. If people come and it's crap, they're not going to come back. Oh. It's as simple as that. They are not going to come back. And as I said, I want to talk about that a bit later when we get a minute. But the product's got to be good. If the product's no good, no, I don't care how much you put in it. You can have Hulk Hogan and Stone Cold come to Melbourne and say, come out to Laz and Peter's show. It's going to be brilliant. And everyone's going to be there. And we're going to be there. And people would come. And they're going to see Hogan, and they're going to see Austin and you and I up there, and if our show's crap, they ain't coming back. They're saying, I'm not going to spend $30 or whatever it is that can see this shit.
Mm.
So you've got to have a good crew and a good show. And you've got to be patient. You're not going to make $1 million on your first show. You're not even going to make any money in your first 6 shows. You need to budget that I'm not going to make a profit for the first 4 or 5 shows and have the money to be able to keep the standard up for the 4 or 5. Because by then, if your product's been that good, those people have come 4 or 5 times and each lot's probably brought someone with them. So theoretically, the crowd should be 3 or 4 times the size by then. So there's a lot of work, a lot of thought goes into it, a lot of planning.
Yeah, me and Mitch, the promoter of All Star Wrestling Australia in Sydney, were speaking about like the various importance of having respect in the locker room and people's roles, and like everyone contributing, because that's the problem I think some promotions have, where there's all this VIP treatment for different people, and it's a case of everyone should try and work together.
Mate, I was the promoter and I was helping put in the ring up. And I had a ring crew I was paying. You pay your dues. You go in there. You help put the ring up. You set the seats up. And at the end of the show, win, lose, or draw, you help clean up, pull the ring down, help everyone out. That's there's respect in that. Not waltzing in. I'm a young guy. I'm 19. I've wrestled in front of 24 people. They've put a belt on me. I strode through the arena with the belt on my shoulder. I do nothing. I come out. I do a match. And then at the end, I'm just mingling in the crowd with the belt on my shoulder. And all my teammates are trying to pull the ring down or, stack the chairs or sweep or what. Mate, that sort of thing just absolutely gives me the shits. One in, all in. Pay your dues. When you get to a stage that you're a Mario Milano and you've wrestled all around the world and you've wrestled at sold-out Madison Square Gardens and you've been able to fill a hall here to capacity and whatever as a wrestler, until you're at that stage, you're one of the guys and you should dip in and do your bit. I'm not saying they don't, but that's just, what you do. Respect in the dressing room is huge. Because if we had a guy that wasn't respectful or had respect, Gene and I wouldn't book him. I don't care who he was. He could have been the next Mario Milano, but if the guy was trouble in the dressing room and didn't adhere to the rules, and we had some rules, this is what it is, boys, and we had some pretty firm rules. As a matter of fact, I've got them still on this computer somewhere in one of my wrestling files where the rest, and it wasn't about power. It was just about respect and professionalism. What time you turn up, how you conduct yourself, and what you do inside the ring, outside the ring, and how you're viewed by your peers and the crowd. And, if you didn't live up to the standards, we would not book you. I don't care who you were. We wouldn't book you. We didn't want trouble. We wanted a crew that were a team. And there's no I in team, as they say. And you know what team stands for, don't you? TEAM. Together, everyone achieves more. That's what the word team is. There's no I. It's not I am going to be great. I am going to do this. It's, it's team. Together, everybody achieves more. And if you don't have that mentality and that respect,
Yeah, I've got an interesting scenario that I'll point out. Hulk Hogan.
Yes.
Like, people go on about Hulk Hogan being an egomaniac, all that, and maybe he was.
Yeah.
But you look at his relationship on screen with Gene Oakland and how Gene Oakland helped hype Hulk Hogan and how Hulk Hogan, gave him respect back.
Look, I've heard a lot of stories, and again, I've never met the guy. I don't know him. But when I was doing the Wrestle Riot tour, we had Road Warrior Hawk on, Michael. And we were on the bus coming back from a show, going back to the hotel. And I'm trying to remember where. I can't remember where. It might have been Sydney, might have been Melbourne. Oh, no, it wouldn't have been Melbourne. Anyway, I can't remember. But he was telling us the story about, Hogan was a very, very generous man. Like, you know, if all the boys went somewhere, he'd put his gold or his black, whatever it was, Amex card on the counter, would never let anyone pay. And Road Warrior was saying, you know, it got to the point where he was just always paying. He was really, really generous. So one night they took Hogan's card and cut it up. And they said, right, you can't pay tonight. So apparently he was a very, very generous person. From what I understand, he was pretty good to those he was close to. Again, from the stories you hear from people who, you know, were with him or worked with him. But I guess when you're the face of wrestling worldwide and you had the profile he had and you're dealing with the people he dealt with, I guess there's going to be a bit of that. But see, I don't blame Hogan. I blame like your Eric Bischoffs. Yeah, they gave him way too much lead. Even someone like that, you would need to be able to be in a situation where you could just sort of pull the reins a little bit when you needed to, pull them in. But if you've given someone like that carte blanche and say, go for it, you've got total control. What do you want us to do? You know, when you're saying to your employer, what do you want us to do? To your employee, what do you want us to do? By all means, in some cases, there can be a bit of creative, or you can have creative over a particular storyline or something. I'm not saying, you know, completely cut them out, especially at that level, where they're drawing you, you know, thousands and thousands of people into an auditorium and millions around the world. Like, you've got to be smart. You don't just turn around and say, well, no, you sit there and you do the same as the jobber. But it's got to be controlled. It's got to be manageable. You can't give anybody carte blanche. You just can't. It goes to your head.
Like Vince McMahon Jr. and Hulk Hogan for a while there had a good thing because Hulk Hogan was a big draw, but they had a good business arrangement.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look, yeah, the guy was being paid mega millions. He was the face of everything. He was riding as high as, yeah, you spoke about Muhammad Ali. I mean, to some degree, you know, Hogan was riding as high, if not higher, at some stages in the peak of all of that. You know, I mean, that's a big level when you talk about how many millions and millions and millions around the world, and, you know, 225 countries that the product went into, and all of that sort of thing, where you're, you know, top. Yeah, I mean, geez, you got to look after each other at that stage. I mean, I'd be looking after Hogan. I'd wipe his bloody ass if he was doing that for me. But there's got to be a level of respect and know your place. A little. I'm not saying, you know, but there's got, everything needs to have levels. Everything needs to have, you know your place to some degree. Because it proved that WWE could still go on without Hulk Hogan. You know, when he went to WCW, I know WCW beat them for about a year in the rankings, the ratings and all that. But, you know, Vince ended up buying the whole bloody company back because they went broke. So, you know, there's an old saying in business: be careful of the heads you kick while you're climbing the ladder, because you're going to meet all those people again when you're coming back down the ladder. And it's very true. I might have kicked your head, you know, climbing to be at the top of, you know, ABC company, and I got there. But at some point, I'm going to come back down the runs a bit, whether I stuff up, whether I do something, whether it's just old age, whatever. I'm going to come back down. And as I'm coming back down, you're coming back up. You're going to remember I was the one that kicked you in the head. You ain't going to do me any favors as you're going up and I'm coming back down. Yeah, you can't just live for the moment. You need to be able to, as I say to some close friends of mine, and there's a few people I mentor in business and that, make smart long-term decisions. Decisions that are only going to benefit you today or tomorrow. They're going to hurt you in the future. You need to make smart long-term decisions.
Yeah, I think that's the problem at times I've noticed with wrestling. Not overlooking where it does do well, but just issues. Like if you look at current wrestling with thinking short term, where they need to think long term.
Yeah, there's things that go on. I mean, I don't know if this is a segue for me to start talking about the current product or not, but
you want to mention a little bit, but I'll lead into how you get into commentary. But I'll let you mention a little bit if you want.
Well, how I got into commentary was, as I said earlier, we booked Gene, he never turned up, and that's how I had to start doing it. That was the story a bit earlier. Was when Bob Blassett came to my rescue on the first show, and then the second and third show I ended up doing it on my own because there was no one there and the commentator book didn't turn up. That's effectively how I got into commentary, and then just kept going from there. But I did it with a passion. I did it. When I say I was calling it as a fan, I was calling it as a fan, but with a business knowledge and a business understanding of what message I was trying to get through and the story I was trying to, beef up the story, how it was going and what was going to happen and, build the boys, build the story. But from a fan perspective with knowledge, if that makes sense. So I was very, very passionate. And look, I was very lucky. Like when they started the Hall of Fame down here, for the NAW Hall of Fame, I was extremely fortunate that I was the first ever inductee. And there was stories in the local paper and in the Herald Sun and that, and there's a nice picture in that, and me holding a microphone and a bit of a story in that. But I was actually the first inductee, and that was mainly, really more to the commentary and the emceeing and whatever. And while I probably haven't shown a lot of that in this interview, I'm a fairly quirky, witty sort of person. So there was always a lot of humor in the commentary, and people would laugh, and you'd say something and they'd laugh, and they'd like nothing. They could sort of relate to you, because I never, ever, ever, and I still don't, have thought I was above the wrestlers or above the crowd or anything like that. I was just one of the crowd. I used to say in my commentary, I'm just your voice, because you would say what you knew they were seeing, what they were thinking, how it was, what they wanted, because I wasn't always unbiased. Like, if Mario was fighting someone and you'd really come on Mario, and you'd really, and the crowd would just come with you. It was huge. They were great days. They were really, really good days. I do miss them, and I'd like to think I've got at least one more run in me, but unfortunately no one's really interested these days.
I did tell Mitch when I was talking to him.
Yeah, I know. But
trying to encourage, because I said that you've had a pretty good time.
I don't care. I mean, look, I've done everything I'm ever going to likely to do in the business, and I'm extremely grateful for the opportunities and the people and everything and the fun I had, and literally thousands and thousands and thousands of shows, and matches, over the years. So, but the fire burns. It's like the wrestlers. You've always got one more match in you. I reckon I got one more good run in me. But if it doesn't happen, I'm very, very happy and content, that I was able to. As I said, I've got friendships that go 30 plus years. I've got a lot of great memories. I get to do stuff like this every now and then. With Mike Manson and I and his son, we do these podcasts every now and then as well, just reviewing some of the big pay-per-views and just our thoughts, and we're trying to help promote a bit of the local pro wrestling. We've gone out to a few of the adrenaline shows, and we commented on them. This year coming, we want to get out to all the local shows and just have a look at them, and then we'll do a bit of a review and a podcast on them, just what we saw, what our thoughts were, good, bad, and indifferent, So yes, I'm still involved, but certainly nowhere to the level I used to be.
Yep. Talking about involvement, whatnot, I'll lead into the role a good commentator has.
Well, I think, look, in my opinion, and again, it's only my opinion, and Jack Little said this to Gene, you don't always have to necessarily call every single hold that the wrestlers are doing, because the people can see it. So it's more about you need to have a really good understanding with the booker of what's going on. So Peter and Laz are going to have this. They're having a match. You know what I would say if Gene and I weren't doing the booking, for example, and someone else was, say, Dazzler was doing the booking as an example, it's all right, Ken. For the match between Peter and Laz, is there anything in particular you really want us to get over because it's going to lead to something or whatever? So you got an understanding of what was going on and what was going to happen. You didn't say, obviously, what was going to happen, but you would lead and grow and plant seeds to help the story build and grow and mature. And by the same token, I'd go to the boys. And I'd say if I didn't know, like when I was going full-time, I knew all of the information anyway. But, if I was doing the show now, I'd come up to you and I'd say, Laz, in your match, just to give me a little bit of meat to help really push you, what are you best known for? What are you, have you got a particular finishing hold? What is it? What's it called? How do you apply it? So if I see you going into something, I say, he's going into a blah, blah, or is he going for the, and so you would always build the gimmick, the character, the person, the story, but you want to do it in a way where you're believable and I used to get incredibly excited with it, and I'd be going full tilt. At the end of a show, I was spent. I was I'd be soaking wet from head to toe and totally spent. Because I put everything into every show to get the boys across, the stories across, but more importantly, well, not more importantly, but as importantly, to keep the crowd entertained, to keep them focused on what's going on in the ring, look for this. And we see things that the average fan doesn't in the ring. And the other thing is, I can't tell you how many times I've done it when they've botched a hold and how quick as lightning you're going to come back and make it look like actually that was meant to happen. You'd say, oh, gee, did you see that? How brilliant was that? He just ducked his head under and didn't let him get that hold on. But they botched it. But you made the guy look good even with a botch. It was things like that. There are so many intricacies that go into it. But you got to love what you do. You got to understand what you're trying to achieve. And that is to get the boys and girls and the match and the feuds across. But you got to keep the crowd interested and entertained. And if there's something going a bit slack in the match or a bit flat, try and get the crowd involved. Try and get a chant going. Try and get this going. Because Gene and I always had the good guy, bad guy comment. So me being the smaller one, was the good guy. So I sort of looked a bit like the dweeb, and he was the big guy, so he was the heel. And so, we'd look at each other, and we just had this chemistry. Never, ever practiced, never rehearsed anything we were going to say. We just had this natural chemistry, and we would just know, and we would feed each other. So I'd say something knowing what he would come back with, and vice versa. And you could use that to lift the crowd again and whatever. It was, I don't want to make it more than maybe it was, but there was a wee bit of science in it to some degree. But you've got to have great chemistry with your commentary partner. And you've got to call it from a fan's perspective, but keep them really, really entertained. But don't lose sight of what you're doing. And that's getting the guys over, getting the match over, getting the feud over, and building so that they will come back. So if you and I then, we've had a controversial finish and we're going to come back next month in a blah, blah match, you pump the crap out of that and build it. And you talk to your partner. Well, Gene, I go, they're going to come back and they're going to do that. And he'll say, I can't see Laz, da, 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 da. I was like, well, actually, I think he will, da, da, da. And the crowd start thinking, oh, shit, I might want to see what actually happens here. There's a lot involved, but a lot of people never really understood it. They took great pleasure in bagging us without realising what we were doing.
Yeah, definitely. If you look at people like Gorilla Monsoon and
yeah. I took a lot of my style from a combination of Monsoon and Heathen. I loved them too. I thought, without doubt, I still think they were the best duo ever on the stick that I saw or heard. I loved it. To me, they captured my interest. And I took a lot of that from them. There was a lot of things I used to say, that Gorilla used to say, the movable object meeting the irresistible force. And what was one I used to use all the time that Gorilla used a few times? He's a great walking advertisement for birth control. There was a few. I took a lot of stuff from them. And because I'm probably naturally a wee bit witty, you come up with stuff just on the fly. Sometimes I'd be saying something, I thought, shit, where did that come from? Like, it just would come. And you thought, oh, and Gina just sort of looked at me like that. I just shrugged my shoulders, but it was all right, like it worked. They were good days. I loved it. Had a ball.
I always loved when Grill Monsoon would say to the brain, "Oh, Bobby, stop it," because he'd always like say something funny and witty, and Grill Monsoon would play, "Oh, stop it."
He used to go, "Will you stop?" But you gotta have that chemistry. You can't just put two people together and say go for it. I've done shows with heaps of people as co-commentators. I did, Kurt von Schneider, Steve Rackman, Johnny Doyle, Alan Dunlop, heaps and heaps and heaps of guys. You didn't always have the chemistry with them. Like Kurt and I, believe it or not, Kurt and I had a reasonable chemistry because Kurt used to always go on about how he was on with my mother and I might be his illegitimate son or something. And there was a little bit of, Rackman, as much as I loved him, he was hard to work with. He was dry. Like, you'd feed him like I'd feed Gene, but he didn't pick up on it or come back. But, he was good. And he always had this thing of calling me Paul, and I keep saying it's Peter. Yep, no worries, Paul. But he was dry. He was a wee bit different, by far, Gene and I, but you got to remember, we worked together for 25 years as a team. But as I said to you, we never rehearse it. We just both sit down and go, all right. And we just, nothing. We wouldn't plan anything in terms of the commentary per se. I'd always have a run sheet ready and I'd do all of that. But that was just a run sheet, so we knew what was going on, who was coming, what interviews were coming, blah, blah. And we just, we had an incredible chemistry.
Awesome stuff. That leads me into, tell us about your time with the Wrestle Riot Tour.
Well, that was a very interesting time. I was going through a very low point in my life at the time, and I was involved in a business that I really shouldn't have got involved in, but I did, and I lost a lot of money. And I was just leaving. I was just about to put the shutters down for the very last time in this business, and the phone in my office rang, and I thought, geez, it'll be someone else chasing money. And I half went out and I better answer it. Anyway, it was Andrew McManus, and he goes, "I'm Andrew McManus," and I think it was McManus at the time. I'm bringing out the Wrestle Riot. So I said, yeah, I know. It's very exciting stuff, isn't it? He goes, "I've been told I should have you as my MC and announcer." I said, "Oh, really?" And God bless her, I didn't find out till years later, but a lot of people will know of this lady, Sue Shooter, who's Australia's number one wrestling nut, who unfortunately is not very well. So we send our best wishes to her. Well, excuse me. You should never do that when you're commentating either. But she'd given him my name. Anyway, he rang me and he said to me, and this was the deal. He goes, "Well, if you're on, we stay at the Hilton hotels all around Australia. You announce and MC all the shows, and I'll give you $1,000 for the week." And this is back in 1992, where that was probably 2.5, 3 weeks' wages. And he goes, "Are you interested?" I said, I think my exact words were, "Oh, shit, yeah." Because I would have done it for free. That opportunity to work with, because we had Demolition and Road Warriors, we had Big Boss Man and Nails, we had Dean Malenko, who was the booker with his brother Joe, who not too many people know of, but was a great wrestler, against the Fantastics. We had Cognac Avides from a Australian point of view. AJ Freely. I've missed a couple, but anyway. Bob Bradley, who wrestled a bit in the WWE and a bit, I think, at WCW. So we had a good crew, and we did. So we met. And Mario was on the tour, sort of like a figurehead, you know. So Mario, Con, and I met at the airport. We flew to Sydney. We got to the hotel. The very first show was at Newcastle, because they always did a show in a slightly smaller town, almost like a full dress rehearsal before you hit the Hordern Pavilion and Festival Hall in Brisbane and Festival Hall in Melbourne. And we went to the Theberton Theatre in Adelaide, and then the Casino in Perth was the last show. So we did all of that. And there was a few little things, you know, we kinked out of it and that. And then the very next night, we were at the Hordern Pavilion. I went, oh, wow, you know. And that's the first really big show I had done. I'd only been officially in the business maybe 3 years or so. Yeah, and then they've got the national anthem playing and all that. And now, would you please make welcome your announcer for the evening, Mr. Peter Farry, da-da-da. And, you know, everyone's booing as I walk out because no one's got an idea who I was. And you're in your tuxedo. And back in those days, I was quite slim and I had a full head of black hair. And, you know, I still had a good face for radio, but that was nothing I could do about that. And I had a ball. But my biggest dream ever in the business, all I ever wanted to do was one festival hall in Melbourne, because that was our mecca. This was, you know, the House of Stoush. And I got to do that, and my late father was in the audience, and and he made it sound even more believable, because I think Road Warrior put his arm around me and wanted to whisper something in my ear for me to say, but it looked like he was having a go at me. And my dad's in about the fourth row, and he stands up, "Get your hands off my son, you bastard!" And while very embarrassing, I thought actually it made it go over a bit. But I got to do one festival hall. We finished up in Perth. The Perth show, believe it or not, we had 30,000 people. And I had never performed in front of anything even remotely close to that sort of figure. I think we'd got about 4 or 5, if that, in Melbourne, but, you know. And honestly, lads, I can say to you, I walked into the ring, like they, you know, make welcome your announcer, I walked into the ring, standing in the middle. I could feel my feet levitating off the canvas. They weren't, obviously, but I felt, you know, I thought, wow, if I die tonight, I die a bloody happy man. And we had a rip-snorting show. It was a brilliant show. Last show of the tour was always good. We had a big night after the show. And in the morning, the greatest thing I think, and I will treasure, seriously, I don't take myself overly serious about what I've personally achieved. You know, I'm pretty blasé about it. But the one thing is Dean Malenko at the airport hugging me. And he says to me, "I've been around the world many times over. You're the most passionate and professional announcer I've ever met." And he shook my hand and he goes, and I never got to sort of speak to him or see him again. I believe he's suffering very badly with Parkinson's now, working behind the scenes at AEW. And every one of those guys, you know, Big Boss Man, even Nails, because he stayed in character, you know, big hug. Man, you did really good. That was really cool. And I just thought, if I never do this again, you know, I sort of, for me personally, I achieved, well, more than I ever thought I would, because I was never going to commentate anyway. But then went on for another 17 years or something, you know, full time and then part time up until, well, I still do the odd thing here and there, but very little. So yeah, so that was just an incredible tour. Never got to do another big one again, but at least I got to do one. So that was pretty cool.
I wonder with Dean Malenko's connection at AEW if he'll reach out and say, "I've got a gig for you."
I'll tell you. Well, I understand he still turns up for work every day, but he's really, really quite sick with the Parkinson's and the whole bit, which is really sad. Funny guy, Really funny guy. Because he said something to me one night before the last show. And he goes to me, man, no one ever introduces, you say, was, former 2-time this champion, that, da, 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 And then I was doing it for the Fantastics. And he says to me, geez, you don't do much for us. Him and his brother Joe. So I quickly researched. I got all the stuff on the card. And both teams are in the ring, and I'm doing all that. And I started doing the whole thing for the Malinkos. And he's got his head down and his hands on his knees. And he's laughing. And he won't look up because he's laughing. And I know if I look at him, I'm going to laugh. And I did this big thing, and the other two knew what was going on. And we just, and after the show, he goes to me, you asshole. But we just had an awesome time. I think, if I live to 100, I will remember that week. It was the best week I think I'd had in the business. Because, over here, chances like that are extremely, extremely rare. But I loved it, and I was super professional because I felt I was representing the Australian scene as well. So I wanted them to have a really good image of the Australian personnel, for lack of a better word, because the only Aussies on the tour, I hope I'm not missing anyone out, but I think it was only Mario and Yakovides and myself. I'm not sure if Ken was on there. I don't think he was. I can't remember. But so I wanted to make sure that the Americans went away at that level. No, hey, they've got some good guys in Australia. Not that, they'd come back and say, hey, come back and do it again, but more representing Australia and making sure they sort of left with a good image of the Australian sort of wrestling guys.
Yeah, it's good to make an impression for sure. AJ Freely, I'm trying to think. Was he New Zealand talent?
Yeah.
Yeah, thought so.
I think him and Con wrestled mostly on the tour. I'm pretty sure him and Con Yakovides worked against each other a fair bit.
Oh, yeah, nice.
Because they virtually had the same matches, in every town.
Very cool. I'll lead into both these questions. I'll sort of throw them together. Big shows you've done, radio and TV stuff.
Sorry, say that again?
I'll throw these two together. Big shows you've done, radio and TV stuff.
Well, the biggest shows obviously were Wrestle Right. TV was probably just before Foxtel came in. There was Channel 31 down here in Melbourne, which was like a volunteer or community station, but used to get a lot of traction. And Tony Marino and this woman called Maria Luisa something or other, they somehow got a contract to broadcast a whole heap of shows that we did, and we were doing it from the Spanish Club in Fitzroy in Melbourne. And I would front the cameras, as the front man, because that was all pre-taped, of course, so we taped it all and that. But good evening and welcome to Channels 31, da-da-da, whatever it was called, coming to you from the bull ring here and da-da-da, Fitzroy, and, another huge night of wrestling, da-da-da, and then you'd go in and do the ring introductions and then jump down and do the commentary. Did a lot of work for Channel 31 when Con Yakovides was promoting all the rock and roll wrestling. I think they were called rock and roll wrestling in those days at the Prince of Wales Hotel, which he, I think, part owns, or he certainly had a very heavy involvement there in that. Did a lot of shows there for TV. So you'd have two microphones taped together. So when you're sitting down, you're doing a commentary from direct feed to the cameras, but also a feed to the public, in attendance. So that was hard because whilst the commentary you wouldn't think would be overly different, you had to tailor what you said to meet sort of both mediums, the people there on the night, but also knowing that this will be watched a bit later in the on TV. So you had to be careful how you said things or what you said, but they were all good. Radio was very much all promotion of shows. We had a very good deal. Well, I'll call it a deal. It wasn't a deal as such. It was an arrangement that actually Jimmy Demiroff in Melbourne had done with Sport 927, where we would go on once a month with Trevor Hempstead. He'd do the Midnight to Dawn show. And he was a big wrestling fan, a huge supporter of the local scene, he's up in Brisbane now. But we would come on once a month for an hour, and there'd be myself always, sometimes Jimmy and a couple of the boys on the next big show or whatever. And we would just talk about the local scene, what was going on, what the big show that we were doing was coming up. So I do 1 hour every month with him. But then you'd get around some of the other stations, and it was just more like, 10, 15-minute interviews here and there and whatever, just promoting shows wherever you could get on, basically, to promote the shows.
Awesome stuff. I'm leading into like the climax of like what you want to say about the current scene, but first I'm going to sort of do like some hype questions.
Yeah, sure.
And this one's one that I feel is very important to like your credentials. Hall of Fame induction, hosting the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, look, as I said a little bit earlier, I was extremely fortunate. I was actually asked if I would host the Hall of Fame, and I said, I think that'd be a great honour, yeah. I didn't realise until I got there on the night that I was actually the first inductee. So you're totally unprepared, and I've gone back 100 times in my mind and thought, I would have liked to have prepared probably a slightly better acceptance speech, but it's not often I'm caught on the hop, but I was caught on the hop, because I wasn't expecting that. But anyway, so we got through that, and then I hosted the evening, and then I hosted nearly all of them. I only missed maybe 2 at most, 3 maybe at the worst, but they'd wheel me out once a year, dust me off, and I would have a segment in the middle of the show sometimes. And so I'd come out, do my usual thing. And it wasn't done like the WWE one where, someone would come out and talk all about you, then introduce you. It's sort of, I would do that, because so some of the boys I would talk about their careers and what they've done. Some of them were not great talkers on a microphone, so it was more, rather than an acceptance speech, like a bit of an interview. If I knew they were in a bit of trouble, or they said to me, I don't know what to say, and they were a bit thingy, I'd say, look, leave it to me. I'll guide you through. And I'd sort of say, look, in my introduction, Laz, I said, you were this, you were that, da-da-da. What do you remember about those days or something? Or just sort of, because once people start talking about what they've done, you'll generally find with public speaking, people talk quite well because they're coming from a base of knowledge and they're confident in the material that they're speaking. You can always tell when someone's not prepared when they're public speaking. So I'd get them comfortable, and then I'd sort of finish off by saying, look, I'm sure there's probably a few people you'd like to sort of say thank you to, and just give them the mic. And some would go okay. Some would say, I just want to thank all the fans and da-da-da. But, it was an enormous, enormous thrill for all of us. Again, probably, the greatest accolade I'll ever get. And I hold that very dear.
Awesome stuff. Before I get into like the finisher move, so to speak, any unsung heroes that you want to give a shout out to with like Australian wrestling, New Zealand wrestling?
Look, I think you need to respect every person that has ever laced up a pair of boots and got into the ring. Because while some are good and some are not good, some are great, some are not great, you've trained to some degree and you've had the balls to step in the ring and do it. So I take my hat off to everyone who's ever got in the ring and had a go. Unsung heroes, look, I think in Australia we try to, anybody that had some potential and that looked good, you gave them a go. But they made their own luck or not. There were those who would listen to you and take the advice on board and would progress and become better. You know, we had people whose careers, for whatever reason, maybe there's one guy in particular, I believed without any shadow of a doubt, he could have been the next Mario in Australia. And it was a young guy years ago called Wayne Starr. Wayne was a young, extremely good-looking guy. The girls just loved him. He was, you know, model sort of material. Great worker, great body, the whole bit. He left wrestling pretty early, and that was a shame. I think he's one I would love to have seen where he got to, you know, in the business. I think he really could have been something absolutely massive. I think sometimes a lot of the unsung heroes, it might sound a bit, you know, like the referees, like they play a really important part, and a great referee is vital to know when to look away, to be able to maybe take a bump at the right time for something, you know, to build up some sort of story, this and that. Look, I was very fortunate. I've worked with some of the best. Tony Marino was obviously absolutely outstanding as a referee, probably the best we've had. On all of my shows, I used little Vic Ferrari, who was just a phenomenal guy and knew the business and understood it. We had a young guy when NAW was starting. He went under the name of Michael Michaels. He knows who he is, and a lot of our fans do, but I won't use his real name because he's deeply entrenched in the Department of Education now. He was a fantastic referee. He was really, really good. I had a lot of time for him. And we had others along the line. Nick Callis was another good one. And yeah, so there were some very good referees. And the people behind the scenes, you know, that helped put the show together. I mean, I used to put up my own sound system. I had my own sound system, my own bell, and I was a bit particular about how I set up. But these days, I think the people that, you know, and especially in the current wrestling where they've got all the big, you know, trons and all the videoing and the packages they put together and lighting and sound and film, I think a lot of those people go very unnoticed. People just see this stuff, you know, all the lights, and they see all this footage on there, but they don't realise how it's had to be shot and edited and cleaned up. And so I think there's a lot of the behind-the-scenes people. I think the wrestlers themselves probably get enough recognition in some respects, not always. But the people behind the scenes, the volunteers, the ones in the canteen, you know, trying to make the promotion an extra couple of dollars by selling some hot chips or a can of Coke, or I think it's all those sort of people. They're the unsung heroes because they help the night get put together and, you know, for all the wheels to turn on the night. You know, people that at the doors checking tickets, that sort of thing. Because no one knows who half of them are most of the time, and it's, yeah, I don't think they get the credit. Yeah, the performers get the credit. They get introduced. They're in the ring. They're doing it. But I think it's the behind-the-scenes people.
Awesome stuff. Well, I'm going to hit you with the big one now. Thoughts on the current scene, both local and international?
Well, this will make me incredibly unpopular to some degree, but I think, look, overall, the basics are all there, but without you know, having to dig at any one or any promotion or whatever, I'd like to maybe talk in general terms. If you're a young, aspiring wrestler, let's start with the wrestlers, and I'll be really quick because we've gone over 2 hours already, and people would be asleep by now listening to me. But if you're going to be a young, aspiring wrestler, you are, for lack of a better word, you're a prize fighter. You're in the ring as a prize fighter. That's what you are, boxer, wrestler, whatever. You're a prize fighter. And you're asking people to pay 20, 30, 40 bucks a ticket to come and watch you perform. When you weigh 70 kilos wringing wet and you've got a bloke in the crowd who's 140 kilos and you're trying to get over how tough and how strong or whatever you are, you need to have credibility. We have a lot of stick figures in wrestling, people whose bodies have not developed. Now, whether they're just taking time because, you've got to grow into an adult body and all of that, whereas I've probably grown into 2 adult bodies now. But look, perception, they say in anything in life, Laz, perception is reality. So what I perceive, I believe. Whether it's true or not is totally irrelevant. If I perceive you as a wonderful, smart, brilliant wrestling guy, that's what I believe. But if I perceive you as some idiot who's whatever, that's what I'm going to believe. So people will believe what they perceive. And that'll be based on what I initially see, what I initially hear, whatever. So my advice to any wrestler is get a body. You can't go in and ask people to pay money to see stick figures. And a lot of the guys are stick figures. Number one. Number two, what is your character? What is your gimmick? Do you have a character? Do you have a gimmick? Okay. My character is, blah, blah. My gimmick is blah, blah. And let's just, for lack of a better term, use The Undertaker. Now, I'm not asking that anyone or suggesting out there is going to be the next Undertaker in Australia or even worldwide, but his gimmick was The Undertaker. He looked the part. He acted the part. He looked like someone from there. And then he could back it up. I saw an interview with him where he said, as a really big guy, 6 foot, whatever he is, 6'6" or something like that. He said, I was one of the few really big guys that could fly over the top rope and I could do all of this and whatever. But that wasn't in the character. My character wouldn't do that. My character was more a ground mat wrestler, was more, methodical of what they did. Whatever your gimmick is. If you're the, Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty type, and it's all high flying. And what is your character? What's your gimmick? You need to have the gear that looks it. I absolutely hate all these ones that come out in runners and cut off jeans and all that. I could go to a skate park and watch bigger guys in the same gear fight for free at the skateboarding. People have got to understand you are putting on a show. You are putting on a performance. You're asking people to come and pay to watch you work, to do your craft. And you don't have a believable body. No one knows what your gimmick is. Your gear does not reflect what your gimmick is because probably they don't know what their gimmick is in some cases. And it's all a spot fest. There is no story. There's no ring psychology. Now, I'm not saying that it's happening everywhere. I'm just talking in general. So don't everybody get too excited and say, but I do this and I do that. There's a lot of you who do the right thing and do a great thing. If you worked, we wouldn't have so many Australians and New Zealanders overseas in WWE and AEW and whatever. So don't get me wrong. I'm just talking if you're a young aspiring wrestler or you just entered the business, it's not about a spot fest. Where is the story? How do you build the story? And this goes for some of the ones in WWE and whatever too. Look, it's just a spot for like that Ricochet. Absolutely brilliant. But the guy should be in the circus, not in the wrestling ring. Well, but it's true. When I say it's true to me. Now people say, there he goes again, old school, rah, rah, rah. I don't care what you call me. If you want to be successful in wrestling, you need to look the part, you need to act the part, you need to be the part, you need to live the part. That's number one. And when you're in the ring, you got to show that you can do some the lack of non-selling. I went to a show recently, and they worked on this guy's leg for half the match. And then he gets up and uses that leg for an enziguri or something. Like, there's no selling. There's no, I don't know whether they forget or they don't know or they don't sell. It's just spot fest after spot fest after. If you did that back in the old days, they would break your legs and you'd never work again because you've left nothing at all for the main event. Because the shows used to build. And there were certain things the mid-carders and the opening match could do. and there were certain things they couldn't, because you could not detract from the main event. Now, I'm not saying go to that extreme, but for God's sake, I went to a show a couple of years ago. I just went one night with a friend of mine to watch. They had 7 matches on the card. I swear to God, on everything I hold sacred, even though the guys looked good and their ring gear was good, and I saw 7 exact same matches. It was the same match 7 times, just different people. Oh, high spot, high spot, high spot, high spot. No sell, no story. Didn't know who was the good guy, who was the bad guy. Like nothing. It was just go out and just do it. But you can't. If you're all doing the same thing, it's boring. If you're not doing a story, it's boring. If you don't have a character, it's boring. If you can't speak on the microphone, get a manager who can speak for you. And for Christ's sake, get some of the managers who can actually talk. You know, there's some of the stuff you hear on microphones from managers and whatnot, and you just think, shut up, take the mic off them. Got no idea. You've got to invest in your craft if you're going to be something. You really, really do. And then the other thing, and we actually said this publicly on one of our podcasts, that we went to a show and you've got all these, you know, prize fighters, and we're paying money to see these prize fighters. And they finish their match, and then they're all standing at the merch table cheering on a match and laughing, and they're all together. And people go and see them. They think, well, actually, you're nothing special. You're not a prize fighter. You know, you just, shit, I'm bigger than you. You lose your aura. You lose that whole, you know, you wouldn't see any of the guys from yesteryear, and even the really big professional guys now, like The Undertaker and, you know, all of them. You would never see them go out and cheering for their mates from the back of the thing, and they're at the merch table, or they're just sitting in the crowd with the thing and they've got a belt over their shoulder. Well, who are you? Look at you. You look about 14 years old, and you know, my lemon tree's bigger than you. So they need to actually understand the psychology of the business, the match, what goes over, what people are paying money to see and expect. If it's just a big spot fest, there's heaps of jobs in the circuses going on. Go work there. Look the part, act the part, be the part, have some sort of believability about you. And then you get them on social media, you know, and I see them. And, you know, you're a prize fighter. You're promoting a big fight. And then you're on there writing some of this absolute crap on Facebook, or I've just scored 200 in some game. What the fuck? Like, seriously. And you're expecting me to come and pay you what you fight. And you're proud of your biggest achievement. You got 200 in some bloody video game or something. Well, understand your market, understand your product, understand your character, understand your marketability. If you want to be a wrestler, look like one, act like one, be one. If you want to be a clown, go to the circus. And there you go. And the same for announcers and all of that. Like, you know, I see some of the stuff and I think, oh, and you just sit there and you cringe. Like, be professional. People are coming out. I went to a show last night at the Regent Theatre. I didn't want to go, but I was dragged along. It was called Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. For the oldies, they'll remember it. But you know what? Every single person played their part. You looked at them and you thought, yeah, the guy dressed up as Pharaoh, which was Shane Crawford, a former AFL footballer, and you knew who he was. He was a footballer. But they dressed him up and he exactly looked like Pharaoh would have looked in the day. Bit of a body on him, obviously, still, and was good in the part. And all the other characters, yeah, they were believable. They looked the part, they acted the part, they were the part, so it was believable. And you think, oh, actually, that was a really good show. Walked out. As I said to my sister who I went with, I said, gee, this was better than I thought it would be. You know, you're putting on a performance. Perform. Let people believe. Let people think, shit, was that legit? Or did he really hurt himself? Or did he really that? Not like I've had my leg broken and then I run out of the ring after the match. And all this hugging of your opponents in the ring. Oh, I love you, blah, blah, blah. But you've just tried to beat the shit out of them. Do that out the back. They're in the middle of the ring all the time, unless there's a big turn or something. Why would you do that in the ring? People have just paid $30 to see you beat the shit out of each other. Now you're one stage off making a porno. Well, come on. You've got to get your act together. You've got to look the part, act the part, be the part, get professional. If you can't talk on the mic, learn to talk. If you still can't do it, get someone to talk for you. And promoters, if you're promoting or booking, if you're working the show, get someone else involved who's got no interest in the outcome of the match, only the outcome of the show. Put on some good matches, good stories. And maybe we've got too many promotions. Maybe a couple of them need to merge. It'll never happen because of ego and, if you work for him, you can't work for me. And if you do this, you can't do that. Who cares who they work for? The more they work, the more they're getting noticed and some notoriety. So when they come on your card, because who was the guy, what's his name, who was on married with...
Tommy Hilfiger?
Yeah. Now, I was around when Tommy started. I drove him to a few shows in the early days. We actually thought, with his height and his look and the body, and this was at a very young age, we were actually working towards trying to make him the next Mario. We thought he's got the look and the whole thing. He could actually do it. Now, nobody had any trouble booking him after he'd been on Married at First Sight. He was in Sydney. He was in Melbourne. He's been everywhere. So why can't a wrestler wrestle at other promotions and then work on, like all this, hey, you work for, ABC, so you can't work for DEF. Well, if you're a great worker, you should be able to work wherever you want. If you're free on the date they're trying to book you, you do it. And this, and again, you got, sometimes 3 shows on in the one night here in Melbourne. There's a very, very tiny pie of fans. And you're trying to split them by a third again. You're never going to get a crowd. You're never going to make money if you're all promoting on the same night and getting people who's only a very small minority now who go to shows, and then they got to pick. Do I go to A, B, or C? None of you make any money. Why bother? Have promotion versus promotion. Have, like in the old days, state of origin, New South Wales versus Vic. Do something. Be creative. Be open. Don't be so insular. Get together. Work together. You'll all win. You'll all make $1. No one's making $1 the way they're going. And I'm buggered if I know how some of them keep bringing out these internationals. Where are they getting the money for that?
Oh.
Isn't there a show coming up very shortly, BCW or something? And they got who was it? There's a couple. There's that I can't think off the top of my head now. But there's about 2 or 3 internationals coming. I don't know how the hell you bring an international out to Australia in the current market. Like, who's paying for it? And what sort of return are you getting on that investment? Now, I might be too far out of it to understand how they're doing it now. But shit, they have big money. These guys don't come out for nothing. And you got accommodation and all the rest of it and flights and what return are you getting on your money? Are you getting a return? Or is it just someone who's got deep pockets and they just keep putting money in but no one's really making $1? So think about what you're doing personally as a character, even as a referee. You can't have we got referees that are bigger than the wrestlers. You can't have that. Back in the day, they had Tony Marino because he was tiny, and he made the big guys look bigger. There was a big, and I can't think of his name, but he was a bodybuilder who was the referee. They had to get rid of him. He was starting to look bigger than the guys. Tony Marino was perfect, about 4 foot bloody 10. Sorry, Tony, if you're listening. I know you're a bit more than that, but he made the big guys look big. And he was nimble. So, and don't be so bloody obvious. Like I saw a show and the referee he saw something happen that shouldn't have happened, and then he pretended he didn't see it. But everyone saw you see it. It was in front of you. Like, learn your craft, get better. Watch others, how they've done it. Talk to people. Don't be scared to ask some of us old timers for help. We'll come and volunteer our help free to help you progress and be better. But the problem is nobody wants to know anything we do or we know, because we've been there, done that, and they think, oh, well, yeah, but you're old school. What would you know about today? I tell you what, no damn sight more than you guys still don't know. And I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about in general. You know, the older wrestlers and the people like that, the Mike Mansons of the world who, you know, who train good guys. And, you know, you'd have guys in Sydney and no doubt Queensland and whatever. There's some really good trainers around. You know, listen to them. They're good for a reason. They were good and they're performing for a reason. So anyway, that's my thing.
Yeah, I think you've made some pretty good points. One thing that comes to mind, like if you look at local music scenes, all the people try and like get people, you know, they try and promote each other, and there'll be like people who know someone in another band or whatnot, and they'll be like, oh, we know this band, we know that band, and they'll try and promote the local scene. And I think in Australia we sometimes do that, but then there's like too much like short term, not long term, where we could do more promoting each other.
Absolutely. The more people that come to wrestling shows, the more people you get interested. And if you're ticking all the boxes off that I mentioned before and they enjoy a show, and then they see a poster or an ad or something online for another show somewhere, they go, oh, we went to that wrestling, it wasn't bad, we might go and have a look. You'll get people coming. We have got to cross-pollinate, because no one's making $1 and you can't survive on 50 or 60 people at a show. It's not worth all the time and the effort and everything that goes into it. All the production stuff, all the videoing, all the this, all the that. Mate, get some return on your investment. Sell your product, market your product. But for Christ's sake, the first thing you got to do is make sure you got talent that look like talent, that have got a character, a gimmick, even if it's just, you know, the old black trunks and the boots. If that's the character because you're a clean-cut person, or, you know, or you're a heel or something, you know, tape up your bloody thumb and use the astic spike in the throat, or do something. Just be a bit different, but live your character. You need to be that character. You need to live it. You need to own it so that people can invest in your character and want to see you. You know. And don't get me started about this hardcore stuff they're doing now with light tubes and all that. I refuse to even acknowledge it. That's not wrestling. That's not wrestling.
I think when they did do like stuff where there was bloodbaths back in the day, like Abdul the Butcher or Bruiser Brody, there was more art to it. Where I think now it's just crash course sort of crap.
Well, I've seen some of that stuff. You know, what was that guy? Something Jack?
Cactus Jack?
No, Jack, that one in the independent scene, and he was doing all those hardcore. There was a documentary, something Jack, and he was arrested and all sorts of stuff. But you know, no.
He was pretty good psychology wise, though.
But you know, the light tubes and the thumbtacks and the all that, that really hardcore stuff they're promoting around now, where it's really, really hardcore and people's
bodies. Sick Nick Mondo?
Sorry?
Oh, there was a doco on a guy called Sick Nick Mondo, and it's going into like, he was into all that hardcore stuff.
Yeah.
About retiring.
See that, because we've done so much spot festing, people have had to do something again different to try. See, the high spot was what got the matches over, you know, like that was now, because the whole match is a spot fest, you know, they've had to go to something so dramatic to try and get a reaction. We're conditioning the fans to want that. That's not wrestling. That's just brawling. That's just fighting. That's, you know, back of pub stuff, round the corner stuff, or hooligans or whatever. That is not the pure art of wrestling in the ring. That's, in my opinion, that is not wrestling. You know, and headbutts that like they're actually doing headbutts and knocking each other out with headbutts and light tubes and all this barbed wire. And I mean, the occasional one where you had barbed wire around the baseball bat, but that was more the spot, not the actual match. So, but anyway.
Yeah, local talent like Crackerjack probably do it like how it should be done, because at least he has psychology and he still has fundamentals. There's a lot of what you're saying. I can't help but think like the basics are the foundation of everything, and I think there's a lot of lacking in basics, and I can't help but thinking no gaps, where there's too many gaps nowadays.
Oh God, yeah. Look. I believe wrestling could be very, very successful in Australia again, but not under the current system. Way too many promoters, too many marks in the business, not enough people that really, really understand it or run it as a business. And there are too many guys working in the ring that are just not ready. Physically and mentally are not ready. They don't understand the ring psychology. They don't really understand how a match should be structured, how it goes together. There's a lot of work. I think you need to peel all of those people away and give them some intense training, and the ones who are at the top of their game that have got a character, that have got a look, a presence, an idea, get them working, build some credibility back in the business, and then slowly start bringing these others back in when they're ready, not before. And just because you're someone's brother or a mate of your brother or this or that, that shouldn't guarantee you a spot. You earn your spot, and you've got to be able to perform, and you've got to be able to have people that are coming to see you. Because Vince McMahon always said, I don't care if I hate the guy. If he's putting bums on seats, I'll promote him. He didn't care who you were.
Yeah. You also think there's like a lack of like experienced mentors in the same.
Absolutely. But the problem is, when you try to help, they basically tell you to F off. They don't want to know. They know everything. They're bigger than Hulk Hogan. They're bigger than Vince McMahon. We know everything. What do you know? Back in your day, no, we know what we're doing. There's a lot of that, and people won't like to hear it, and people will start throwing things at the TV or the radio or wherever they're listening to us. But, but it's true. There's a lot of people. There's some very, very good ones. Don't get me wrong. There's some great people out there. Very, very good people. And I'm pleased to see, I think one of the promotions in Sydney has used Dazzler a bit to try and help them. And, and that's good. And they're getting results. I think that's Amy Action and Dean Draven and them. I think they use Ken a bit to help. I think it's them. Down in Sydney.
Yeah, them and All Star, I think, have used Dazzler as well.
Well, see, that's good, because at least they're to me, and again, it's perception. I don't know them. I mean, I know Amy from years ago, but I haven't spoken to her in years. But at least they're having a crack at getting some decent old school professionals to try and help and mentor and teach and give the little tips and the tricks, because they're trying to better their product. Good on them, 100% fantastic work. But some of the others who it's too insular. I own the promotion, you're my mate, you're booking it. Who the hell's teaching? And, if you're teaching someone, because I used to teach at TAFE about small business and customer service and all of that sort of stuff. I used to teach, but I'm teaching from experience, having been there, done that, for 20 and 30 years in that industry. So you'd figure I'd have something to offer, from retail and customer service and all of that. And that's why I got jobs as a teacher in TAFE. But who's teaching the wrestlers now? Do they have enough skill and knowledge and talent to be able to teach? Do they know enough about ring psychology and holds and all that? I'm not saying they don't, because I'm not involved. I don't know. But on what I can see from the outside looking in, it doesn't look like there's a lot. And as people are going to say, he's bagging the local scene. I'm not really. I'm just saying that some people are doing it really well, some are not, but it's easily fixed. But you've got to look the part, act the part, be the part, live the part, and promote properly and get some wrestling back into the wrestling. It's not a circus act. So the intelligent people will understand what I'm saying, and the ones who keep telling me I'm an old C and I should F off, they won't. But they're not the people I'm trying to get to, because you're not going to get to them.
Yeah, there definitely is hope with like companies willing to work with people of knowledge, like you mentioned. It's really good that there are people starting to step up. I think what's happened is too much click culture's taken over, and there needs to be people gutsy to actually say, like you're saying. And I think that's starting to happen with like some of the promotions that have worked with Dazzler and whatnot, where people are actually starting to be like, we want to learn from people with more experience and we want to better the scene.
Les, there's a lot of great people like Kenny around that are more than happy to teach and give tips and whatever, but we've got to feel that we're wanted or whatever. Like, we've all offered in the past and been knocked back. So, how many times do you offer? How many knockbacks are you going to get? You think, well, they don't want you. They don't want you. I'm not looking for anything in particular personally. I'm not going to be there to teach someone how to wrestle. I can work with people on how to commentate and how to, do promos or whatever. That's probably a bit more of my strength in that part. But, you get people like your Ken Dunlops and the like, who've got some fantastic wrestling knowledge to pass on to the wrestlers. Yeah, and get someone like a Vic Ferrari or a Tony Marino to help teach the referees how to really referee. You can't expect people to go in and do a job if they're not trained or not trained properly or don't understand the science of it or the basics of it. It's not their fault if they're put in and told, yeah, you're good to go. No wrestler's going to say, no, I don't want to get in the ring. But are they ready? You're investing your money in those people as a promoter.
Yeah.
If I was investing money in someone, I'd want to be sure I'm going to get some return on it, or they're going to do their job, so to speak.
Yeah.
But anyway,
with Dazzler's book, like if you read his book, it even goes into where Australian wrestling had some really good names in marketing. But to finish off, I'm an R-ing, well, not really. You touch base on advice for promoters and advice for young wrestlers. If you want to elaborate any more on that, or
I've probably said more than enough. I've probably people who are going to get the message would have got it by now, and those who haven't got it by now, they're not going to get it.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I can talk about it for 3 hours, and we've gone 2.5 already. But if they haven't got the message by now, I don't think we're going to waste too much more airtime on it.
Yeah, I felt this is really important, and I'll pretty much sign off. I just wanted to ask you, do you have any wrestling media platforms that you do? Like you're saying you did podcasts, and anything you want to plug?
No, look, the only thing I'm involved in with Mike Manson and his son and is through Spotify. It's called the Universal Podcast Network. And we do 2 shows on there. We do The Wild World of Wrestling, which is just on wrestling. But we also do another one, which is more interviewing celebrities and people of note, called The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. I think I'm the ugly. But so they're the 2 we do. We've talked on The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. We've, had people on like Darren Hinch. We've had the guy from the Wiggles. We've had Ken Dunlop actually on that, although I think he's on the other one as well. But we've also had some really interesting political ones, and sometimes it's topic of the day, celebrity of the day, people we've got onto. Had a brilliant one with Neil Baum, who is just an AFL, scenes is just seen as the Godfather. We did about an hour and a half with him. So we've had some very, very good podcasts with celebrities on The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. But from a wrestling perspective, Wild World of Wrestling on Spotify, on the Universal Podcast Network. But that's the only thing I do these days, here and there. As I said, sort of the phone doesn't ring much these days.
Yeah. I might ask you this because there was some stuff you said that got me curious, and it could be an idea even if you don't. There's been talk of people that offer consultant work for people in wrestling. Do you do anything like that, or do you plan to offer anything?
I would be. Look, I'm happy to speak to anyone who's legitimately interested in bettering their product. So if you're a wrestler, a wrestling promotion, a booker, a promoter, if you are genuinely interested in tapping into some knowledge or just getting opinions or just having a chat or wanting a bit of mentoring or a bit of consultancy, whatever, I'm open to anything as long as you're legitimately interested in doing it. I'm not interested in tire kickers, but if you're genuinely interested, people can find me on Facebook. I'm all over the place. I'm not far away. Most people have got my number or access to me from when I was doing the wrestling reunion thing, and so I'm certainly readily available.
Awesome stuff. Yeah, it sort of gives me an idea of one avenue the local scene could tap into if people are interested, just with awareness. People like yourself, if there's more knowing, people wanting to offer consultancy with the local scene, if that's out there, there may be people who come out of the woodworks. Oh yeah, I wouldn't mind having more consultancy, or wouldn't mind having some consultancy where they can really tap into resource.
Well, you could sort of be I suppose, a bit of an advisor, a bit of a mentor, a bit of whatever. Look, I'm open to helping anyone in wrestling in Australia who is genuinely interested in bettering their product, and they're doing it for the right reasons. The minute I'm getting jerked around or anything, I'll walk away. I don't have the time or the patience for any of that sort of stuff anymore. I'm not as tolerant as I used to be as I get older. I'm not saying I'm a grumpy old man or anything, far from it, but if you're legitimately serious, I'm happy to help. But if you're going to muck me around and you're not sorted out and you're not professional and you've got no idea what you're doing, please don't phone me.
Awesome stuff. I'll let you go. One thing I do as a bit of a hobby, there's a platform called Cameo.
Oh yeah.
And I actually hit up people from the wrestling industry on that, and I'll pay for it, just asking their advice on things with the wrestling industry. So that's something I've been doing myself. But there's probably other people that do that sort of thing. But if there's more awareness of what you're saying, consultancy and that, it'd probably be a great avenue, because I think a lot of people have a bad experience with some of the local training schools, or they don't get in with a good one, or there's something that they're not tapping into. But with more awareness of what you're saying, with people like yourself with experience, it might be an avenue for people, where they can sort of learn some stuff, being through consultancy, mentorship, etc., depending different aspects of the business. Because it's really hard. The old school mentality is link in with a wrestling company, learn on the job, be mentored on the job. But it's really hard to know what wrestling company you can actually learn from. So having some people with experience that, like yourself, that have done tours and stuff like that, and have been in a time where it's been a lot bigger business and more professional, I highly advocate that and encourage it.
Yeah, no, well said. Yeah, absolutely. There's plenty of us around who are willing to help.
Definitely. If people are wanting to step forward and are wanting to make it known that they're willing to do that, if people are willing to be serious and are really interested in learning, I encourage people to let people know on my Facebook group, Lazarus Pro Wrestling fan group, and even hit me up if you want to come on the show. Good Couple of LLJ, and I'll give you a forum.
Awesome. And I think it's fantastic what you do to keep promoting the business and keeping it alive. I think that's really good. Credit to you. Well done.
My pleasure. Just through my Facebook group and trying to tap into just running a Facebook group and then getting to talk to people in the local scene. It's encouraged me with my passion, and I'm really eager just to learn, even if I'm not promoting or not involved, just like learning from a passion standpoint, being that, if you've got a real passion for pro wrestling, you're interested in learning about the history and the business.
Well done. Very good.
Thank
you very much for the opportunity to come on.
It's my pleasure, and thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. And
no worries.
Yep. I also really appreciate a lot of what you've said. I think there's pearls of wisdom, so I encourage other people to take note.
Well, thank you very much, Les. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
No worries. Have a nice day, and hopefully we can catch up on here again soon someday.
Anytime at all. Just let us know.
No worries. Catch you another time. Been a pleasure once again, and enjoy the rest of your day. And
thanks, Les. You too, mate.
Catch up, mate.
Good on you, mate. Thank you.
There you have it. Just spoke with Peter Farry. It was fairly long, but I feel like there was like a lot of insight. And I hope people are taking note. I got a lot out of talking to him just from a passion standpoint alone, with the history of professional wrestling, Australian and New Zealand professional wrestling history. A lot of great insight. A lot of experience, 32 years experience in the business. I really appreciate his time and having him on here. And I'm thankful for being able to talk to him on Good Cuppa of LLJ. The next show, Tuesday next week, because I had to reschedule. If all goes according to plan, going to be speaking with Joe Zapier, who wrestled as the Don Rockabilly Rebel. And he also has a background as an entertainer and actor, and currently does like entertainment gigs as a musician, whatnot, and various acting gigs. Looking forward to him. How's it going, Alan? Just about to sign off, but thought I'd say hello. In case people don't know, Alan's Dazzler Dunlop's brother and used to wrestle as Ricky Diamond. Bloody good wrestler. But going to sign off. Been a pleasure. Look forward to doing more of these. It was a pleasure talking to Peter Farry, and hopefully everyone enjoyed the show today, and look forward to doing more of these. Oh, cheers, mate. Much appreciated. Glad you enjoyed it. Hopefully get to do like more of these and have some great guests. If you're interested, hit me up. I'd love to have you on as well. Gonna sign off. I'm brain farting a bit at the moment, so all good. I'm gonna sign off. Look forward to doing more of these, and we'll do a countdown before I sign off, and then I'll sign off. And awesome stuff. Let us know. Work out something with you. I'd love to have you on for sure. Really enjoyed talking to Dazzler Dunlop on the show. Plan to talk to him more in future as well, so I'd love to have you on as well. being that you're his brother and have had a great career as Ricky Diamond, Red Hot Ricky Diamond. It'd be interesting to chat to you and get your insight, etc., on Good Couple of LLJ. So appreciate, if you're interested in coming on the show, appreciate the opportunity. Anyway, I'm going to finally sign off. I'm a bit of a chatterbox sometimes. We'll do a countdown, then I'll sign off. Appreciate the kind words. It was a pleasure doing the show today. I appreciate talking to Peter Farry. Looking forward to doing more of these in future. Until next time, take care. Peace.